Welcome to Spy Satellites, a podcast about Dune Imperium and the people who play it. I'm your host, CJ, and this is Rotation 3, where we're ranking the Tleilaxu cards from the Immortality expansion. So join us for a roundtable discussion focusing on cards, combos, atomics, and everything spice. If you like what we do, please give us a like and subscribe, and if you'd like to support us, you can do so on Patreon at patreon.com/hiddenassets. Supporting us helps us continue to produce quality content and gives you access to some pretty awesome perks, including voting for the upcoming podcast topic. So tell your friends and let us know how we're doing. We're always trying to improve the quality of our content, and we can't do it without you, the listener. Orbiting Arrakis with me today is our convivial coordinator, our illustrious imperator, BlackSHadow.
The superlatives that make the kittens purr, aren't they? Howdy everyone, hope you're all keeping well. Just as a bit of context, this is actually the first podcast we've recorded since our official launch. We uploaded one after the launch, but that had been recorded a little bit beforehand. But to be honest, this is our first one that we've done since the launch. It has been, as you can understand, pretty busy. I think things have gone not too badly so far. It's obviously still early days, and as mentioned at the start, like we're still in the business of refining and kind of sorting out exactly what we want to do and what we want to do with it. But with the competition coming to a close with the Gold Path Internationals and everything, it has been very busy. But so far, it's been pretty good and pretty exciting. So it's good to sit down for one more of these. And yeah, ranking 18 cards is a lot easier than ranking 80 of them.
Yes. I'm very glad we're not doing that again. Let's not do that again. All right.
We've learned our lesson. Or should I say, you've learned your lesson.
I've learned my lesson, yeah. Also with us today is one who might in fact know the weirding way, and one whose iconic head ought to instill fear into his house's enemies, Orski.
Hey, what's up? I'm also glad we're only doing 18 cards. When you first messaged me about this episode, I assumed we were doing all of the cards from the expansion. I'm like, oh my god, I don't have time.
No.
Do we have the weekend?
Yeah. No, thank you. Oh man. Well, thank you for being here. We appreciate it. If you did not know, Orski does weekly live streams with the community on his channel. He has a ton of great Dune Imperium and other board game content. Check it out. A link will be in the description below. And if you're watching or listening rather on iTunes or any other podcasting service, you'll be able to find him on YouTube. Just search for Orski.
Future World Series Board Gaming Champion coming.
Yep, that's right.
We still expecting our 20%.
Yep.
I won my button terraforming Gaia project twice already, so.
We'll have to do that soon. That sounds fun.
Yeah.
Last but certainly not least, and you heard him, is our subatomic cruise missile, the one whose poker face is better than Daniel Negreanu, Phil Ivey, and Johnny Chan's combined, Lannister.
Hey.
God almighty.
Thank you. Did pretty well for myself. I like to leech off of hidden assets and Orski, so I love being part of their content. So I'm glad to be here.
Good to have you, buddy.
Thank you.
All right, so quick update before we start on this podcast. So we're changing the format slightly. Basically, it's going to be a little bit shorter, but we're going to be doing it twice a month instead. So before we'd covered like a bunch of topics in one episode, now we're going to do like one big focused deep dive on one topic. And then we might have one or two smaller topics if we just ramble into them, but generally it'll be focused topics. So sound good to everybody?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. All right, well, I guess let's kick it off. So really what we're going to be doing here is ranking all of the Tleilaxu cards from the Immortality expansion. Now those are the cards that show up in the Tleilaxu Row. There's 18 of them. There's actually 19 if you include the mandatory card, whose name I can't remember. It's
Plane Forces.
Yeah, the reinforcements card. And so we'll rank that one too. If you wanted to throw that one in there, I don't know if you ranked that one, Orski and BlackSHadow.
I've got it somewhere. Yeah, I've got it somewhere.
I did not.
It's no big deal. We'll figure it out. Yeah, we'll figure it out. So we'll be doing that on a tier scale of S, A, B, C, and D, and we'll explain what the cards do and kind of give you our thoughts on them as we go. And so I really don't have any sort of, outlined way of going about doing this. Why don't we just choose a card and go? How about, Orski, you want to choose a card first and we'll kind of just go from there?
Yeah, let's start out with industrial espionage.
Ooh, industrial espionage. All right. So can you tell us what that one does?
Yes, industrial espionage costs one specimen. It only has access to green. It will draw you a card. And if it's grafted, it gives you a research icon and a specimen, and it reveals for 1 persuasion. So the reason I wanted to bring this card up first is because it's my lowest rank card.
So it's in D.
Yeah.
Yep.
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 Yeah, I think this is it's cheap, so it's not the worst. It's just when you're buying a card, if it's only going to have access to one spot, you want it to have a pretty juicy reward to kind of offset that. And drawing a card is fine. It'll cycle itself out, I guess. And if you don't have any grafting cards, that graft bonus won't do anything for you. And not only do you have to have the grafting card, you have to draw it with this card to really make it work. So I don't think it's consistent enough or good enough to like really put itself in the tiers with the other cards. So yeah, lowest ranked.
I didn't have it quite as low. Like, I've got it lowish. I had it in C tier in the end. I think a lot of these cards, obviously we'll talk about these a fair amount as we go through this. There are obviously several cards that have an initial effect, but if they're grafted, have bonus effects. There's obviously some in the Tleilaxu deck. There's some in the Imperium Row as well, which I can't think of off the top of my head, but I'm sure there'll be some... I'm trying to think of some now, actually. There is a couple, isn't there? Like, if you graft them...
They
Drop
get some
Smuggler
bonus, yeah.
is an example. Yeah, there's a couple others as well. And it obviously is a problem. Obviously, like, the problem is if you need to get the most out of these cards, you need to graft them. The problem with that is, of course, you need graft cards. And while there are a fair amount of them, obviously you're getting these cards that do grafting, then you're getting these cards that need to have more assistance to get the most out of them, and you're already starting to fill your deck up, which is something that when I did my in-depth guide back a couple of months or so ago.
A while ago, yeah.
It feels like an eternity, to be honest. But one of the things that's very easy to do when you first pick up this game, and I talked about, is it's very easy to just flood your deck with all manner of cards, thinking, oh, all right, I've got this card that I picked up this graft card. I've got a card here that's better if I graft it. Great, let's get them, use them together, lots of effects. Of course, the problem being that once you start doing it, the odds of actually drawing both in the same hand is actually not great. And then you're having to get more graft cards or something, and then you've got more graft cards, you get more cards that can work with grafting. All of a sudden, you've got about 20 cards in your deck, and you're just sitting there doing not a whole lot. So I think Industrial Espionage is definitely an issue. That I will say that when this does get grafted, it's pretty good. Because you don't have to worry about it. It does have only council access on its own, and yeah, on its own, this card is not great. It's like kind of Mentat fodder, largely, I would say.
Yeah.
It's probably the only considered Mentat. To be fair, you go in Mentat and you're drawing two cards with it. That's not terrible. But obviously, you don't get there, you've got a problem. But being able to graft this and get hold of some research and extra specimen cube is not the worst thing in the world. And I think the thing as well, a lot of these cards, and we'll talk about more of these to some other ones later on, is obviously when you're grafting it, you don't have to necessarily pay attention to where you're sending it as well. You can, if you send this card to like, say, like selective breeding, for example, all of a sudden you're getting quite a lot of value out of this. 3 card draws, you're doing some research as well. You're getting specimen cues, maybe for like Beetle Buy and whatever else. So, like, I can't hate it, but obviously this card on its own is not great at all, and it is a bit of a problem. But I couldn't quite put it at the lowest tier. I think this card, like, compare it with some others and actually be pretty formidable. Whereas there's a couple of cards I think that really, really do struggle. So it was C tier for me.
C tier? Okay. Lanny, what about you?
I love this card. I mean, the moment I buy it, I get to see the next card in the row. Yeah.
It's fishing fodder for you.
it's a D tier for me. I'm with Orski's. Hot garbage all day.
Yeah, I have this in. It's not my lowest ranked card, but it's pretty low. I have it as my top D tier card. If that means something, it doesn't.
I mean, I think that there's a reason that it's only a 1 coster, right? I think that's what it boils down to. Like, it's a cheap card. Its effect when you get it off is nice, but it's not great. But obviously, you've kind of got to commit down that path. And the thing is, as well, with a card like this, I think some of the Tleilaxu cards clearly favor some types of leaders more than others. Whereas Industrial Espionage is like, if you're playing as Ilban, like, I think even on its own, this is okay. Like, if you're not doing too much else with your specimen cubes, if the row's kind of quiet, picking this up is not the worst thing in the world. Even just like, you send this to Mentat, you're drawing 3 cards.
Yeah.
That's pretty good. You can't hate that. And that has some use, definitely. But outside of like Ilban and like Leto and those people that obviously get reductions on like and bonuses for hitting council spaces, this is probably not one that's going to help you very much in the long run.
Yeah, that's my point too. Is like this is an Ilban card entirely. Like if you aren't playing Ilban, don't play this. Don't ever buy this card. Like really, it's just terrible. The cool thing about it though is that there are a lot of other cheap graft cards in the Tleilaxu Row that work really well with it, such as the Face Dancer or the Initiate or whatever. Those ones are great. And if you can get those and this, like if you get the Face Dancer and graft it to this and you're Ilbon and you head over to like, I don't know, if you want to Mentat with it, you could do that too. But like you're drawing a ton of cards and that's very satisfying. So it is kind of like a combo-esque card, but it's not very good.
When it rolls nice, it's solid, but
Yeah.
it's just it's too infrequent, which is the case with grafting. Unless you kind of go all in with grafting, and that involves trashing some of your starter cards, like a card. And the problem is, if you're going to go all in with grafting, there's a lot of better cards for you to look to graft than this, to be honest.
Yeah.
It's a one coster. I think at one cost it's fine. If you think you can make it work, great. But other than that, you probably should leave it where it is.
Yeah.
More often.
I would say if this card was a graft card, I think its stock would be significantly higher. I think it'd be in the B tier. But
Yeah, I would agree. I would also then suggest it probably needs to be more expensive.
yeah,
Because
well,
you're peeling off a ton of abilities, like basically whenever you want. So, and you're playing one card to draw one card, so it's kind of net neutral in that respect. And there's been a lot of debate whether like that's a good thing or not. I think that's totally fine if there's another card we'll talk about later, like natural reflexes, where this conversation will come up as well, sort of thing. But yeah, it is what it is. I think it's fine. I think there's personally worse in the game. There's places this could be useful, but typically like. Unless you can see immediate use, like if you've got like say, the spaceport card, for example, the tech I should say, industrial research actually can be pretty good because you can like pick it up, maybe know you're going to draw it with some grafting next hand, and then get early use out of it. That might propel. That extra research bump could get you like that extra influence bump to protect an alliance. It could get you that extra bump to get you more beetles, get victory points. Like, there's definitely set places in industrial espionage works, but it is a little too inconsistent for me.
All right, Lannister, why don't you select the next card you want to talk about?
Actually, I'd like to play a small game here. CJ, why don't we both say at the same time the worst card we think on 3?
Okay.
1, 2, 3.
From the tanks.
Yeah, there we go, baby. Ding, ding, ding.
Yeah, from the tanks. I know
costs-
when this game first came out, we looked at the Tleilaxu deck, and from the tanks definitely stuck out a bit, didn't it?
For sure. I mean, it costs 2 cubes for what Sardaukar Legion does even better than. It has less access than Sardaukar Legion. It has 1 to buy, 2 cubes for on the usage on a green space only. Come on, no access points. Come on, give me something to work with. This doesn't even have grafting potential.
Doesn't have grafting. If it had grafting, I'd say it'd be okay.
Yeah, but it's strictly worse than Sardaukar Legion. Like, even without the access, the Sardaukar Legion allows you to throw troops in as a passive reveal. Doesn't even allow that. So
Yeah, I mean, none of the Tleilaxu Row has great reveals. They're not designed to be revealed. They're cards that are designed to be played. So, I suppose there's a few questions from Tank. The first question is, why is it 2 specimen cubes and not 1?
yeah.
That's the first question, isn't it? That does stick out to me. Like, if this is a 1 coster, I don't actually hate this card, again, for similar reasons for industrial espionage. And I would actually argue, like, grafting this to to a card that you can send to, like, a city space, for example. Like, that's some firepower you're throwing in, actually. That's 2 extra cubes. That's kind of like a mini, like, Gurney Halleck in a way. But it is very situational, is the problem. Like, from what I'm saying, I think it's definitely viewed as, like, I've got this as joint worst. It probably is the worst, I guess, in a way. I've definitely got it D tier.
Yeah. Because the opportunity cost is so bad. Like, you spend the 2 cubes, and if you reveal something good, you've lost that opportunity because 2 cubes is huge. Like, you're not getting Piter or Stitch Order after that.
Yeah.
Like, at least with industrial espionage, there's a chance you might be able to buy it, but no way with 2 cube purchase you can buy something good after that.
That is a really good point, because the threshold for buying seems to be about 3 cubes in Immortality, and you really do either get a 3 cube good card, or you buy 1 and get a 2 or something like that. But yeah, it's tricky, man. I don't like this card. I've played with it a couple times and just felt like, why did I buy this?
The problem is it doesn't have a lot of tempo. If you play it as its own, it is a tempo loser, isn't it? You're spending an action. Like, your best use for this is, like, again, hitting Mentat, like, which isn't bad. You're basically stalling for a combat is what From the Tanks does. But the problem with that is that typically you want, especially later in the game, people want to buy Mentat early because obviously they're scared of losing it, and losing that opportunity cost. So I think that's why. I guess there's also an argument. Maybe the reason it's 2 specimen cubes is because, like, the reclaimed forces, like, you can spend 3 cubes to garrison 2 troops. So they figure, well, we'll make it a little bit cheaper, but obviously you've got the card in your deck. It's the only thing I can think of as to why it costs 2 specimen cubes. But yeah, it's not great. Do you think this is maybe like the developers were playing like original Dune, Imperium, and they're like, oh, I really miss the rally troop space?
I think so, a little bit.
I mean, because I
Yeah.
partly do miss the rally troop space. Like, I think it was underrated. Like, it was a tempo loser, but in the right execution, was actually pretty good.
Orski, where do you have this one ranked?
Yeah, it is my second to last one. It joins industrial espionage at the bottom of my tier list. It's too expensive for what it gives you. The green spots are probably the worst spots. You don't want to be going there super often. I guess certain leaders like going Mentat, so it makes a little bit more sense. But a card that only has green access, so if you want to get these 2 troops in your garrison, you have to go to tech negotiation.
Mm-hmm.
It is a big tempo loser. It costs too much, like everyone was saying, and yeah, not a very good card.
Yep, agreed. All right. BlackSHadow, which one would you like to talk about next?
Let's go for. I guess we'll stick further down the list. Guild Impersonator. This is the Spacing Guild card. Couple of cubes. It's spacing access, allows you to graft, and if you graft it with a card that lets you, and you gain spice over the course of the turn, you get a bonus Spacing Guild bump along with the 1 persuasion reveal.
And where do you have this one?
I struggle with this a little bit because I have seen this used actually pretty effectively as like kind of an ambush to like secure and steal spacing alliances. But I've also seen people look to do that and then either get it or lose control of it, and this card is doing absolutely nothing. So I've got it C tier in the end, which I think is probably reasonable.
Yeah, that's where I have
totally
it too.
I had it too. Let's see tier.
The one of the bonuses of Guild Impersonator is it's obviously a looking at the if you gain spice, you get a faction bump, which is pretty good. And like if you see someone pick this, you know that they're going for the spacing alliance. Obviously, this pairs well with like if you say manage to get hold of like Guild Ambassador, for example, at the same time, it's pretty clear what's going on, and you're gonna have to like have a race with someone to try and deny them that. Because obviously, if they lock up the Spacing Guild alliance, that's a problem. You've got a significant issue there. And obviously the beauty of the card lists as well is like you can just hit like Hagar Basin, for example, or Imperial Basin, pick up like a cheap spice, and you can gain a faction bump. You can go if you can graph this to say like shipping, that's huge because of course you can cash in shipping. Like, it doesn't, the thing you got to bear in mind is you gain spice this term. Doesn't matter how you gain the spice. Doesn't matter if you gain it by mining, by shipping, by an intrigue as well, which I've seen people like combine this with like
The High Council
Glimpse
one.
the Path. Yeah, the High Council, Councilization, Glimpse the Path, I think it is, or is it the other one? I can't remember exactly. There are some intrigues that give you spice, for example, and I have seen it combined with those, for example. And there are other cards as well that give you spice. The one that you've obviously made use of before was Guild Impersonator and Corrupt Smuggler.
Yeah.
Which, of course, you can graft to anywhere you want, and you can graft it to the Spacing Guild, and get hold of spice via the Corrupt Smuggler's grafting ability, and then that powers Guild Impersonator, stuff like that. So this card can be pretty fun.
They say though that there was a very cool story behind the use of that card by Cheesable one time. So he was
Yes.
using Elisa Ekaz, hit 5 spice, revealed the impersonator for 6 spice, went to Highline with that, stole the alliance. I didn't see it coming. It was so.
Oh yes, of course. And then because the ability with
the passive ability.
What's
So
the head?
wait, he used it to gain the spice and then go to Highliner, so he can't use it that way. He would have to have
No,
6
no.
spice prior to the
No, sorry. He had 6 spice prior, but he took the alliance anyway.
took the alliance. Yeah.
It was
He's
incredible
highlining, double bumping,
Yeah.
because of course, one step ahead is the Elisa ability reminder, though. If you reveal it for your second action and then use the card, and it only has 1 icon on it, you gain a spice, which of course powers Guild Impersonator.
Yeah.
So it's a pretty.
As I recall, he crafted it to something pretty disgusting too. Like, it's the one that is 4 to buy, 1 spice on usage, and if it's a spacing or a guild card, you go up a bump. I forgot what it's called.
We'll put it
I
on
know
the
what you're
screen.
talking about. I can't remember what it's called either.
I think it's Interstellar Conspiracy.
Interstellar Conspiracy. That's it. No,
That's
the
the one. Yeah, that's
Sorry.
the other one. Yeah.
My apologies on that.
That's all good.
Yeah.
That's all good.
Yeah,
Trying to
it's
remember
I'm
what
graphics are
actually,
bad.
I think I'm a little bit higher on Guild Impersonator. I have, well, like higher. You guys have them in C. I have them in B. I think Guild Impersonator is really good with combat focused leaders
Mm-hmm.
that benefit a lot from being able to build up their spice economy while gaining bumps passively. And it has Highliner access as well for the late game. So I think it is a very good card. Just being able to get passive bumps in general is pretty good in this game. And with the experimentation cards that give you research, it makes this card even better because even if you don't have your deck flushed out yet, taking Guild Impersonator as an early card, you don't have to worry about the combo potential because you can just throw it on one of the two experimentation cards that your deck starts out with, and you're going to be generally pretty happy.
Yeah.
Grabbing spice, getting research bumps, and yeah, getting a bump with the guild.
I think my only issue with Guild Impersonator is I think the agent box, like, it looks good. The problem is like by like round 3, round 4, like especially in Immortality, like the agent box is kind of there, but I don't think it really impacts anything because either someone's already secured, you've already secured the alliance by that point because you went all in for it, or someone else has gone all in on the alliance to stop you claiming it for whatever reason. So unless you've got they're playing like Tesia and you can use as like material just to shift away with your signet ring or whatever reason, for example. I don't know. I'm not so sold. Like it looks good, the graft ability, and it can definitely be combined pretty nicely, but like by the late game, like this might as well not have an agent box. That's my only issue with it. It's why I couldn't put it any higher.
So I mean, I agree that this card can be late game a little bit useless. It gives you access to the spacing guild, so like you can always
It's the
Highliner.
Highlander access. Yeah, that's its big thing.
Yeah, I like that. I do think that if you get this card early, if you're either Elesa, even Memnon, or just have like your research icons on your desert cards, those are great. I mean, this card can be a very good early card, but it is you aren't going to get it until like round 3, round 4, so it is a little bit slow. Yeah, but it's cool. I think it's fun. I think it's like a high C for me, maybe a low B, but I think it's fine. Like I pick it up when I'm meme nodding a lot.
Yeah, because Romber wants to go into combat and allows him to go into combat while getting the bumps. So I think
Yes.
it's very relevant because he wants to get Interstellar for that once or twice a game shipping, but he can't waste his actions not going to combat. So it kind of supplements that with his ring going into a spice location of some sort. So
Nice. Let's talk about Usurp. So this card costs 4 specimens. It's a graft card. It does not have any icons. It says you may graft this card to a card in the Imperium row without acquiring it. If you do, trash that card at the end of your turn. And it has 1 persuasion, 1 dagger, and 1 specimen cube. We might have some different places for this one because so I have it at the low end of C tier because I think it's fun but not very good. I think it can high roll and I think it costs too much. So that's what I think about it. I think it's fine, but I don't ever buy it. I think I bought it once and didn't do very
I
much.
think I'm in very close agreement with you. I have it as the low end of B tier, so we're pretty close on that.
Low end B, yep.
Yeah. So again, same idea as you. It takes 4, and if the road isn't working for you, you're really SOL. So you can't really do much with it, and it's a lot of investment to go with. So if you put that in, you're basically 2 steps back on the beetle track unless you make something work out of it. So it's
Yeah.
got to make at least half a point, I'd say, because each beetle track movement's about a quarter of a point. So if it isn't earning you at least half a point, then it's basically garbage, I'd say. So yeah, I totally agree with you on that.
There's also this weird thing in that you're playing Usurp, which reveals new cards for other people and can potentially harm you. Like if you reveal a card that they suddenly are like, oh, I'll just grab that, or I'm Helena, I'll just like pick that one up. There's all sorts of things that kind of go wrong with it sometimes, and it is contingent on that row. It's fun. I think it's a really well designed card because I think these kinds of high risk, high reward cards elicit fun play and exciting viewing. But like I think it also works best if you somehow pick it up early and don't use your atomics token. So then you can kind of flip into something better if the road dries up, something like that. But yeah, it's a bit weird.
I think this comes to the crux of me and CJ's style. We prefer consistency, so it's really hard to be consistent with Usurp because you're losing a different card every time. So I think that's also why we dislike it. So that
Yeah.
playstyle is indicative of that. So yeah.
Yeah, I also have it in C tier. It is a fun card, like you guys were saying. The issue is, given how expensive it is, you're not getting it until later in the game most of the time. And at that point, the Imperium Row's probably been pricked pretty thin. The really awesome cards that you want to play with this, like Gurney Halleck or Power Play, those are going to be gone most of the time. If you have your atomics, you can blow it up and look for something, but I feel like a lot of the times you're getting this and then you're pretty underwhelmed by the time you're actually getting to cycle it back through your deck and then use it. So I am going for the Beetle Bump most of the time unless I'm trying to have a little bit of fun, like you guys were saying. But yeah, as far as consistency goes, I'd say it's pretty low consistency as a result of how late you end up getting it going.
What's really weird about this card too is that, and it's fun, but it's weird, is that if you trash a card that has one of those red bands that says if this card is trashed, you get that effect too, which is cool, but like I don't know how often that's gonna come up, and
There's not a lot of cards that have the red bands.
no. Plus one of them doesn't have any icons, so you can't even use it all that. I guess there's one card, and it's the eyes card, right? What is it? Shoot, I can't remember.
Replacement eyes.
Yeah, replacement eyes. That's the target, but I don't know.
So when I was sitting down ranking these cards, I think Usurp was one of the hardest for me to actually make a proper ranking on, because I think this card can vary pretty wildly in value. I've talked about this card a lot on some of the streams I've done, playing Immortality, especially playing as Paul Atreides. I will still sit here and say that potentially Usurp can be one of his best cards. And I legitimately believe that. And there's a few reasons for this. Usurp is one of those cards, like, especially, I think out of the whole Imperial, it's one of the cards the most that you are kind of terrified to draw. Like, if you've got to draw cards at the end of your last action, this is a card you do not want to draw. You don't want to see it, because if you do that and you don't get the graph value out of it, like, that is by far obviously the biggest value of this card, so that's kind of scary. With Paul Atreides, you don't need to worry about that, because you always know what you're going to draw next, so you can draw safely, know what's going on. But working in conjunction with that, if you know that Usurp is your next card, and if you have a way of drawing a card, be it holo projectors, be it your signet ring with some actions, be it anything like that, Usurp does open a lot of possibilities for you, because effectively, all of a sudden, you're going from working with a 5-card hand to almost like a 10-card hand, because you've effectively know that you can draw into Usurp and then play anything on the Imperium Row that you want. And I think for Paul specifically, this allows an absolute bucket ton of creativity. Obviously, you need a row that cooperates. You need cards that you can kind of graph with fairly enough decent value. But you know, part of Paul Atreides is taking risks and kind of manipulating things best you can anyway. So it kind of comes with the territory. There's definitely leaders where I think this is a lot more difficult. Obviously, if you keep hold of your atomics, then if you need to and you want to take a gamble, you can blow the row. I think when Usurp works well and you do get access to cards like power plays, treacheries, stuff like that. I once actually managed to power play the 8-coster, the one that no one likes.
Occupation.
Can't think it was
Ooh.
Occupation. I actually managed to draft that once, which was a good feeling.
That's
And the
cool.
thing is that Usurp also managed to do, and people forget about this, is not only are you grafting it, but obviously you're trashing immediately. This card also acts as a semi-denial as well. You can take, it basically works a bit like Helena's Signet Ring, except instead of like reserving it and then buying it, using it on the spot and then getting rid of it. And if the row is kind of quiet, but there's only 1 or 2 good cards, for example, you can actually use Usurp to deny those cards to other players. Which can really mess with them, and then they're having to like scramble for different plans. If they're expected to get hold of Web of Power, or, for example, and you usurp that, and suddenly there's a load of like Sardaukar infantry in the row, they've got a problem. Especially if you kept hold of your atomics and they've already used it, shifting for cards early on, and you can actually really, really kind of cunningly manipulate that resource. So I ended up using in B tier. I wanted to put it higher, but it is ultimately, I think, just too expensive. I get why it's 4 cubes, because it can do crazy stuff. And I guess they figured they've got to have some other card other than Twisted Mentat that was a 4-coster. And I guess Usurp was as logical a choice as any. So But I will definitely say, yeah, like this card is if you've got it, is scary. And if you're willing to take chances, you can do a lot of cool stuff with it, and you can make yourself really unpredictable. Because suddenly, if you make one good use of it in the mid game, people are going to start being scared of the Imperium and start thinking, "Well, what if he's got this card?" And it can really mess with people's thinking without even realizing it. So, it's a danger card, but obviously there are times where the road just goes kind of quiet, and it's just like it kind of sucks to have. So you're taking a chance, usurp, but I think this could be a lot of fun. And if you're playing with Paul, I think this card gains a ton of value.
I think like it would go up for me if it also let you use the Tleilaxu Row cards, but it doesn't, and that's kind of a problem.
No, yeah, that's an interesting thought actually. Being able to graph those well, I've never really thought about that. I mean, we obviously talked a lot about Gola on this channel, and obviously we will continue to do so very shortly at some point, I'm sure.
BlackShadow, why don't you choose the next one?
Let's go for a fun one here. Speaking of fun cards, I think one of my favorite cards, although I haven't got it the highest ranked, Chair Dog.
Oh,
So
okay.
Chair Dog is 2 specimen coster. It has some city access, but the main thing is this grafting ability is a graft card. At the start of your reveal turn, return the other grafted card from play to your hand. So effectively, what you're doing is you are grafting this to another card, and then that card is going to become part of your reveal at the end of the round.
Yeah, it's a cool card.
I when we talked about this, when we did our first discussion about Tleilaxu, with that Tleilaxu Masters and Golem and stuff like that, a couple of Spice Satellites ago, Chair Dog, I did make a mention, and I think design-wise, I think this is an awesome card. I think it's really fun, and I just think that it's a good idea. I think it sounds cool. It's an idea of kind of combining. You do have 2 economies, I think, some of this game. You've got your action economy with using your agents and obviously doing things, but you've also got like your reveal economy of your persuasion in order to buy better cards, improve your deck and stuff like that, and also get a lot of resources from time to time. Chair Dog is the attempt to kind of meet those in the middle, and I think for that spot, it should at least be amended, I think, for its idea. I think,
Where do you have it?
though, I've got it as B tier.
Okay.
I wanted to put it higher. I really, really did, but I do accept that there are some problems with Chair Dog in that sometimes you get it with intentions to like, oh, I'm going to do actions, I'm going to fight combats, I'm going to go for alliances, and also buy Spice and Flows on the side. But the problem is then you're kind of like starting to fill out your deck a bit. And of course, the problem with Chair Dog is that that's a card you'll use. All right, there are some cards this rolls well with, like there's the Imperium Ceremony, I think it is, for example.
Yep.
Like, pretty much any free persuasion card in the game, Chair Dog is awesome for, because they've all got at least decent actions, and of course, their reveals are great. So anything like that, you can get on a Chair Dog and combine that, that is enormous. But I don't think this card actually synergizes as well as I would like. There's a lot of kind of, so be it. Like, if you Chair Dog experimentation, it's like, I mean, okay, that's fine, I guess, but you're not getting much persuasion out of it.
Yeah.
You kind of need 2 persuasion cards to get a lot of use out of Chair Dog, and the problem is that they're all cards you're gonna have to buy, because you're not really Chair Dogging like convincing argument unless you absolutely have to, sort of thing. So, I think in practice, as I've played with this card, I don't like it much as in action, but I still think the idea is super cool.
I agree with that. Actually, I thought you were going to pump the rank higher, BlackShadow, because I had it at B as well.
Really wanted to.
I know it's one of your favorite cards too. I was like, yeah, it feels like it gets clunky. It gets in the way a lot of the times. I like the idea of it too, but as you said, we just clutter our deck so much that sometimes it just ends up getting in the way and just being a 1 persuasion, research station, research.
Yeah, if you can trash your deck, like if you're playing like Armand Kaz, this card is very scary. If you've got cards that allow you to trash, if you get to selective breeding, you pick up like Fedaykin, Death Command, and stuff like that, and you can start using Chair Dog, and you can consistently start combining it with these stronger cards. Chair Dog can be devastating, but the problem is it takes a lot of effort to get the most out of Chair Dog, and sometimes like you just can't make that happen. Like you just can't find a way to trash in cards. Some games just don't know. Like some leaders aren't very good at trashing cards because you're busy visiting city spaces, or you're fighting other factions, or anything like that. So I think that is the problem. And you also gotta have the idea, if you're gonna be revealing cards with this, you need to have a plan of what you're doing. Are you likely gonna get Spiceman's Flows? Because if you're not, then what is Chair Dog really doing for you?
Yeah, I agree. I actually had this card in Deke tier.
Oh
Don't
wow,
Oh, I
Drops
don't
my
really
I
give
just
you
don't
that.
think it's that good, honestly. I feel like every time I stream, there's all the Chair Dog fans coming out. It's two specimens, which I feel like is expensive for what it does. It only has blue access, and most of the time, it's getting you like one extra persuasion at the end if you can graft it to a two persuasion card. Because if you just didn't have Chair Dog and you reveal, or if you just revealed Chair Dog, you get one persuasion. So in order to kind of get your money back, plus one, you need to do it with a two persuasion card. I think you have to have a really good card to synergize with Chair Dog, like you were saying. And even if you get that really good card, there's a decent chance you don't draw into it. So
Yeah.
I
The
think
problem is
the
the problem is
downside of
you
Chair
need
Dog
more
isn't
than one,
worth the
don't you?
upside.
Yeah, I think you need more than one. Like if you like you say if you pair this with Piter, that's great. But how often are you actually going to draw Cheddog and Piter
that's a
in
that's
the
a
same
yeah.
hand?
That's
That's
what I
the
was gonna
issue.
say. Is that if you're going like I've got one card I want to pair it with, well, I mean that's cool, but let's just think about how often you're gonna have those cards together in your
That's hard to
hand.
do unless you're like particularly like you. The problem you've got as well with Cheddog and stuff like that is because then you obviously want to reveal this and get this in the same hand as say Piter. You then can start becoming scared of drawing into your deck because you don't want to draw Piter and you don't want to draw Chair Dog. You want to draw them together, and then that can start kind of having some other effects on your overall game. I think putting in DT is a little harsh, and I don't think I can go to any of your streams anymore. But
Yeah.
uh, but I think it's a card on the face of it. I think it's great, and I always bat for it because like when it works, it feels so satisfying and it's great entertainment. But it doesn't do it as often as it probably should do, which is a shame. I still think like one of the best design cards in the entire deck.
Agree. So
But
hold on before you get to your butt. I also had it in B tier, but actually upon hearing Orski's discussion of it, I think I'm gonna drop it to like C tier, top of C tier. I think it's better than the Impersonator. I think it's worse than some of these other cards in B tier I have. Like, and it's definitely on the level of Usurp, like randomness. Like that's what I was thinking. I was like, oh man, this card is about as random as Usurp, but it costs less, so it's slightly better.
yeah, you are obviously taking chances with Chair Dog. Like the thing is about Chair Dog, like you need to either pair. You need cards that have good agent boxes and
And good
decent
review.
persuasion
Yeah.
boxes, and there aren't a lot of those. If you can get one or two and get Chair Dog, great.
So
But if you can't, then you could probably, I guess, find better uses. You might as well get one more specimen and just get a beetle bump, I guess. I don't know.
I
Well,
think
like-
for me, the saving grace for this card is the city access. So there's about 10 cards or under with city access crafting capabilities that work well with it. So, for example, Chair Dog with even Fremen Camp, for example, that's 4 cubes into combat on a city square. So
Yeah.
I like it for that purpose, even if it's just an extra 2 persuasion. It's very powerful stuff. I think BlackSHadow and I discussed a lot about what we disliked about how powerful Gola was because the city access, which
We'll get there.
we'll get there. But in relation to that, the city access grafting capability is so much more significant than people give it credit for.
Yeah. Lannister, do you want to choose the next one?
I like this card. It's called Contaminator,
Ooh.
which is 1 cube only, has access to Fremen, and it gives you a beetle bump when you use it. On reveal, it gives you 1 buy power. I like it a lot because essentially what I've been telling people all along is if you're not doing an action that gives you half a point, then don't do it. Well, this makes you get 3/4 of a point every time you do it because you're getting 1/4 of a point from the beetle bump and 1/2 of a point for the Fremen bump. So it's 3/4 of a point every time you go to use that card. So it makes your action 50% more efficient every time you use that card.
I think this is great. I have this in A tier. I think it's one of the best early buys in the Tleilaxu Row, and you can usually get it round 1, so it's great.
Yep, A tier for me as well.
Yep, I have it in A tier as well. Fremen spots are good. Going there, getting another card with access to let you go there more is always going to be nice, even if you're getting water or getting troops into a combat with hardy warriors. The one cost is very cheap for the beetle you get out of this, to the point where I think it adds a little bit more. If this is in the opening row, going first is even better because now, as long as you draw into one of your experimentation cards, you're guaranteed this card. So I like this a lot. I think I already said it, but yeah, I have it in A as well.
Yeah, same here. It was A ranking for me. It's kind of weird though, because like I think a lot of the better cards like tend to be really good because they have a lot of options. And Contaminant is the exact opposite. It has literally 2 spaces that it can go on its own. Which, you know, it's kind of counterintuitive. But the thing is, it's really cheap. Like a 1 specimen cube, like that is so cheap.
Yeah.
Like this could probably do a being 2. But I get what it's 1. It's only 2 spaces it can go in. In theory, this could be really heavily blocked. Like if you draw Contaminator, but like you're forced to act, and someone hits Still Suits, for example, and you've got no water, that sucks. Now the solution to that is probably make sure you've got water, because Contaminator is a really powerful card. Instead, just sending Contaminator just to hardy warriors, just to fight combat, and getting those Tleilaxu beetle bumps on the side, like that adds up after a while. That takes pressure off you worrying about the extra victory point, which you typically need to try to find. Like you want to try and get that first point. Contaminator can even sometimes get you to that second victory point as well, and you're still picking up intrigues on the side as well, which obviously helps with the whole combat thing. So I think it kind of synergizes quite nicely with the spaces it goes to in the rewards that it kind of offers. And Contaminator as well as a graft card. If you can graft it to something else, great, you know. Send it with anything, you know, graft it wherever you want, and you're getting a beetle bump on the side. I think that's pretty decent value. It's a simple card, it's pretty cheap, it's pretty effective. Yeah, I pick up Contaminant whenever I can. It's super good to have, and if you can get some use out of it, and even fight for a Fremen Alliance right on top, perfect. What more could you want?
Yeah,
Found one. All of us agreed on this ranking.
We finally agreed. Yes.
Finally.
I think that the best thing about this card is that it's not a graft card. And that sounds weird, but if you get a 1-cost graft card, that really kind of like takes up a lot of your options. You lose cards you're going to reveal for. In early game, you want to have extra persuasion to reveal usually for 1 or 2 cards. The strength of this card is that it's not a graft card, and then later on, when you acquire those graft cards, you'll be able to make it better, you know. So I think that is very, very good for what it does. The beetle, you know, it turns into like intrigue cards and then points, possibly spice. Getting you a little bit further ahead on that beetle track gets you a lot of bonuses. So yeah, I love this card. I think it's just really, really great. So
I think you bring a good point here. Like, I think a good comparison to this is actually on Distro Espionage. Obviously, we started off here. Both are 1-costers. Both only go to 1 set of accesses, and both on their own have 1 effect, and they both go for 1 card. It's just, it shows you the difference between, obviously there's obviously innate differences between the card draw and the beetle bump. Obviously there's gonna be different values there, but it just shows you like how Industrial Espionage kind of like, apart from 2 leaders standing alone, it's not very effective. But Contaminator is good for almost everyone. You know, even if you're not particularly, even if you've got Contaminated towards the back end of the game, you know, and that could give you a late push. You know, if you still need to secure that Fremen friendship, and like you're a beetle or so away from getting that victory point in the Tleilaxu track, you know, just visiting Still Suits is great, and you can send that water to get hold of spice. You can go research station. You know, that might power some intrigues you've got. Contaminator just has so much more flexibility in what it can offer, just because it's going to a faction space.
yeah.
Over Industrial Espionage, for example, which shows why there's such a difference in the ranking. You know, Industrial is difficult to use. Contaminate just standalone is pretty good on the whole.
Yeah, as Lannister was saying, it gives you points, and Industrial Espionage does not. That's a really big difference.
Not directly, not on its own at least. It doesn't.
Yeah, and of note, it's a Fremen card tag as well. So all the Fremen bond, Liet Kyne shenanigans, it also plays into that as well.
Yeah, that's true. It's one of the very few Tleilaxu cards that actually have any kind of faction traits on it. You are true. So if worst comes to worst, like if you can play this and then start revealing it, and you can play this and reveal it as like Liet Kynes, that's pretty good.
Yeah, you know what I think is really interesting about the design of all these cards as an aside, and maybe you all have thoughts on this too, is that none of the Tleilaxu cards have any access to the Bene Gesserits, which I think is perfectly thematically correct. The Tleilaxu
I guess so, yeah.
and the Bene Gesserit do not like each other in the novels. They're completely at odds, and so I just find that like fascinating that they did. I mean, there's an Emperor one, there's the Carino Genes, there's the Impersonator. And then we have the Contaminator, but there's just no Bene Gesserit access on any.
Even the face dancers, but it doesn't fool them. So
it's great.
Brownie points to Mr. Denon there.
Very good points.
Yeah, I noticed that the other day. I like how the face dancers don't go there because the Bene Gesserit are trained to recognize them.
Yes,
which was
People still try to play face dancers to Bene Gesserit spots, though. See, all the time. Everyone keeps trying to do it. You just think, oh, it's got all faction access. I'm like, you can't do that. Like, oh, yeah, of course. Oops.
I just figured it was like the top 4 or 5 cards are all Benny cards, so they didn't need any more help. Right? I mean, in the shadows.
You're not wrong.
I mean, the Bene Gesserit's got enough ridiculous cards to go there. I mean, you don't need any more.
Give them some love. Give the Emperor some love, right?
All right, Orski, you want to do the next one?
Well, I guess speaking of face dancers, do we want to tackle these together? Do we want to do them separately?
Do them together, I think.
Yeah, sure.
I think together makes sense, yeah, so.
Yeah. So face dancer initiate and face dancer. The difference being that the just plain face dancer draws a card. I have these in what? I have them both in C tier together. I think they're good, solid cards. I don't think they do anything crazy. I think being able to send, you know what, top of SAB, yeah, top of C, we'll say, because I do think these are really good cards, and it's basically the intrigue card. Can't remember what it's called now. That lets you have all the faction spots.
Dispatch and Envoy.
Yeah, Dispatch and Envoy in a consistent form. If you have other cards that have really good agent abilities, being able to graft it to them makes them even better. And Face Dancer Initiate is so cheap. One specimen cube for that ability is just really solid. The more I talk about it, the more I'm thinking they should be in B. But I really like these cards. I think they're very flexible, and you usually won't regret it if you just buy one and toss it in your deck in the early game or in the late game. So
yeah.
Absolutely.
I completely agree. Like, people underestimate like the ability to hit factions and graft these with cards that, you know, even just like, say, if you go to, say, the Emperor and just go to Wealth, like if you pick up Face Dancer like in like round 1 and say, or Face Dancer Initiate, whichever one, and you pick up the card and you graft it to Wealth and say use Experimentation, like you're getting an Emperor bump, you're getting 2 Solari, and you're getting an Experimentation bump as well. That's not bad value, you know? Like, how can you hate it? It's kind of similar to, say, like when the Baron, for example, goes to smuggling, and he's basically, his card has a shipping bump and an intrigue. Like, you can't complain at that sort of value, you know? It's the same sort of idea. And it's cards like these, which I think is part of the reason why now when you are fighting for alliances in this game, that you can't sit on full persuasion. Because it's cards like these that allow people to hit these faction spots a lot more often. A, because there's just more chance to go there, but B, you're still being able to get the agent boxes of cards like Experimentation, or of cards that give you like extra resources, of faction bumps, or card draws, and like that. You're being able to synergize all sorts of bits and pieces. And again, they're not that expensive. Face Launch Initiate, you know, 1 cube for grafting to 3 factions. Like, that's pretty good, you know? And, like, especially, I think the Fremen Access especially, I think is really, really powerful. If you can get, like, say, I had Face Dancer once with Gurney Halleck, the Hardy Warriors. That felt pretty good. You know, you're a ton of troops, you're drawing 2 cards, you're replenishing yourself. You know, again, stuff like that is really, really strong. And the Fremen Access should not be ignored at all. I think it's definitely the best part of them. The extra bonus as well is they've also got a load of card traits as well. Again, the Fremen bonds there. They've got the Emperor spacing, so that can play into some cool stuff as well. I think I've had like Face Dancer alongside with Keys to Power. I've been able to combine that before. That can be pretty fun. Stuff like that. So yeah, again, it's the flexibility, which I've always loved, and I've always professed in Immortality. But being flexible is so useful in this game because there's a lot of ebb and flow, a lot of crazy stuff happens, and you know, ultimately in an arms race, like you need flexibility. You can't just go into it with one set idea of how you're going to play the game because it just never quite works out that way. You know, you've got to react to the situation in front of you. I had them both in B tier in the end of the day. Like Initiate, I think I would have had in C tier, but the fact it's only 1 specimen cube and it just allows you so many options with so many different cards. Like, there's almost not a bad time to pull one of these cards. Like, some Tleilaxu cards, I think you can pull them at the wrong time and it feels terrible. We'll talk about a couple of those as we get there, but, like, when is Face Dancer like a bad card to pull? Like, again, you can just send Face Dancer with like a convincing argument if you need to, and just hit a faction space and just get a bump. You know, you're challenging friendships, you're getting your way towards alliances. These spaces are powerful. You know, hit them as much as you can.
What do you guys think about the ranking between those two? Which one would you prefer over the other?
I mean, it's a really good question. For me, I have Face Dancer in A tier underneath the Contaminator. It's like just below that one. They're very similar to me. Obviously, a card's not as good as a beetle, but it can be good as a beetle in the right circumstances. And I have the other one in B tier. I think it's fine and good. I would take it, but I would definitely take other cards over it. So that's where I have it, and I think the Face Dancer is just better. I think the card is arguably better, though it's weird. I was mentioning the 3 cost kind of like threshold where you can usually buy a 2 and a 1 or a 3 early on, and I think honestly I think Face Dancer Initiate might be better for your buck because you can peel another card off the top of the deck, and that's potentially a much higher upside than buying the Face Dancer with the card. So if I had both of them in the row, I might actually err toward the side of the cheaper one, knowing that I could even pick up the Face Dancer if I had 3 of the specimens. So that's my thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's opportunity cost is what you're thinking about, isn't it?
Yeah.
You know, like if there's some other cards. I totally get that. I think it's close. I think it's situational. I think it also depends on who you are. Like if you're going for Spice Must Flows, obviously Face Dancer has some extra value because you're replacing the card. The thing you got to bear in mind, of course, is if you're grafting and you're doing lots of grafting, it gets very hard to buy Spice Must Flows. So you need the card draw to replenish that, especially for playing like Ilbarns or Helenas, that sort of thing. So Face Dancer you probably want. But if you're just going in for combats, like, you know, you don't really care, to be honest. Like that extra card you draw might not do a whole lot for you. But it does mean at least you're seeing the card again faster. I guess there's that. So
Yeah.
I don't know. It's pretty close to me. I wouldn't hate either. I don't know if I'd want to buy both regularly. I think there can be times where you end up drawing both, and that can get really awkward. But yeah, I'd say I don't know. It's tough, isn't it?
Let's make some really good points here, and this is actually what I was trying to get around to. Play styles again really matters a lot. If you're a rushdown character, you really like face down initiate. So that's my style. I like the face dancer initiate, just because, as CJ said, you can use that to peel off another card to see if there's a better one afterwards. Because the cost is effectively double compared for the face dancer in the face dancer initiate. So although you're getting one less card draw, you're getting more opportunities, and at the same time, I'm trying to rush down the beetle track as fast as possible, and 1 cube less is 1 cube more that I have to earn, push that track a little bit more. So for me, that playstyle matters a lot. But as also what BlackSHadow mentioned, that extra card draw for the Spice Slow matters a lot. So I think the rating should be valued based off of what style you are basing yourself on. If you're more of a rushdown character like myself, I value Face Dancer Initiate more. But if you're more of a Spice Slow strategy, then for sure the Face Dancer is better. So that's my perspective on that. So for me, I'll rank the Face Dancer Initiate higher, but I certainly understand if somebody chose the Face Dancer over that as well.
You got to justify the card draw. You've got to say, is this going to make sense? But to be fair, like how often are you going to have the choice of both? It's pretty rare.
Yeah.
Like that's I think I've seen it like once.
Yeah.
You know, typically it's not a question you need to answer or worry about. Like if you can get hold of either of these, great. If you do happen to get both, then you know just sit and make this. You know, is that card draw going to make any sense to you? But typically speaking, like if either of these turn up, I think they should at least be considered as part of your strategy.
All right, I'm going to move us along to the next card, and I'm going to choose this one. This is Subject X, whatever it is, the subject one.
37.
37. I can never remember the
137.
X137.
X137.
The giant ape.
Yeah, so let's see, where do I have this one? I have this one in B tier, just like a middling B tier for me. I have it actually above Face Dancer Initiate, but I actually think that it's probably lower than Face Dancer Initiate. I think it's pretty cool. You get the extra beetle for 1 less specimen, and you get this card that is potentially pretty strong. It's not that hard to trigger the agent ability. Sorry to explain what it does also. It has a Landsrad symbol and a desert symbol. And its agent box is if you are on the first rung of the Tleilaxu research track, that first like unlock area, you get a beetle. And when you buy it, you get a beetle. So that's all it does. It doesn't have anything else. It's 1 persuasion. Yeah, I think it's a B tier card.
I agree with
I
it.
actually had it as A. I'm
Oh,
not
you have it
gonna
an A.
lie. I have it as an A tier card. I really do. I think this card has a crazy amount of snowball potential. Like, if this turns up on the opening row, there are times I will play specifically to try and get hold of this. Obviously, you have the fact that you're buying and getting a beat straight away, which doesn't hurt. But like, if you can get this early and you tailor like your strategy to like make sure instead of revealing those experimentations, make a point of playing them and get this card active ASAP. Those passive beetle bumps over the course of the game, huge. I think really, really significant. It takes a lot of pressure of having. You are going to get that first victory point almost guaranteed, and you're probably going to get the second one too along the way as well. Its value does taper off though, is my only concern. Like towards the back end of the game, like you can still buy it, and get it as basically buy it in as a cheap beetle bump if that's going to help you get a victory point or an intrigue, maybe for a combat or something like that. There's obviously options there, but I think like if this is to me one of the strongest like opening Tleilaxu Row cards I think in the game because it's only 2 specimen cubes. I really do.
Interesting.
My only major complaint about it is the green and the yellow axis of it. It
The
intersects with
access is not great. No,
yeah.
this needs grafting to like really. If you can get some graft cards, like this with like a face dancer, is crazy. I think that's crazy, crazy strong potentially. You can do any kind of graft card. I think subject goes up in value even more. But yeah, like, admittedly, like if you can hit Mentat, for example, as well, reliably, like this of Leo, and getting cheap Mentats, and you can get this active, that's also really significant. Except problem is people are probably going to start then blocking you because they realize how good it is. But even just tech negotiation, get some spice together, buy a tech, get a beetle, get this. If you can somehow use this when you get hold of your swordmaster, that's great. Or high council, and even just like combine it with shipping, great value.
Yeah,
But
so
yeah,
that's where I find the valuation is because when we compare it to Contaminator, Contaminator has an access point for it, admittedly a single one, but for X137, it intersects with the experimentation card. You have to typically choose between using the experimentation card or that one, unless you get a hold of Mentat. So
Yeah.
it kind of coincides with it, and that's why I drop it to B tier because it doesn't mesh well with experimentation because normally you're going to have to choose one or the other unless you're playing two triangular spots, which is kind of rare, I'd say. So that's why I
but not
dropped it to B
often,
tier.
weirdly. But it's difficult. Like again, it's just there's other cards where you do. I don't know. I in my experience of playing with this, like I found this to be a pretty ruthlessly effective card if you do lean into it a bit. There is obviously issues with experimentation, but I've tend to found is obviously I'll play those experimentations earlier than I normally would, and then I just don't play them as much later on. I don't play Subject X137 the intention of finishing the research track. I'm thinking I'm going to rush it early and then get X137 to get my beetles for me on the side. And then I'm still revealing experimentations. I'm still getting cubes for them, which can supplement whatever I need to do as well. So if it's a card I think you have to lean into when you get it. But I've used this very effectively, and I've seen it do a lot of damage.
Yep,
What about
I
you?
have subject X137 in B tier as well. First of all, 2 specimens to buy a beetle, that's just good value. So even later in the game, if you need that one beetle bump, totally fine buying this. It's especially good because late in the game, you're probably not drawing back into it anyway. Early in the game, it's tough. I see what you're saying, BlackSHadow, but like Lannister was saying, you do have to choose experimentation or subject X137, and you have to play what 3 experimentations to get up to where you can start getting beetles off of this. So early you get this, you're gonna have to get 3 research bumps before you even start getting the beetle out of this. I think it comes online a little late. I think it's maybe better as like a mid-game buy after you've gotten your value from that. But even then,
Yeah, it kind of
the
goes
green
both
and
ways.
triangle
Yeah.
access, you just don't want a ton of that in your deck. So I still think it's a solid card, but I have it in B.
Yeah, I know I'm gonna lose this fight. One thing I will say when I have bought this is I've typically just taken the top half of the research track as well, just to rush. Yeah, I'm willing to give up some of those middle road rewards for the research station, and I'm happy just to rush the research track as fast as humanly possible, and just push it immediately, just to get this card online as soon as possible. Because if you buy this card, until you get that that first research marker and you get the access done, Except 137 is not a good card. That is the problem, and maybe that does. It's definitely lower end A for me, but I've managed to get a lot of use out of this. I think that's one problem. If you go into this, you need to lean into it if you get it early. And if you are going to get this, you've got to have a plan. Right? How am I actually going to get this research online fairly quickly? Like, am I in a place to do that? But again, just buying it for the beetle bump, like it can't be bad, and it's also like acts as a denial because if you can't make great use out of it, someone else can. 100%, someone else is going to be able to use this pretty effectively at your table. So, at the very least, it's acting as a bit of denial as well, and just keeping it out of their hands.
Yeah, I want to say that my favorite thing about the card is actually the free beetle with the buy, because I'll be in situations where I'll be fishing for this card with like buying a 1-cost card late game to just get that last point I need. So I think it has a kind of like a nice gotcha kind of like sneak the extra point out kind of moment. And I don't like the access in this card at all. I think it competes with other cards that I want. But I do think it is a cool card. I have it in B as well, like as I mentioned. But I kind of like, I understand. I think I might move it up a little bit higher on my B tier list. Or on my B ranking. It's kind of like maybe a little bit higher than it was before. A little more toward the top.
Is when this card peels off, it's amazing, but there are times where it does struggle a little bit standalone, and I really
also relevant. If you do rush the top of the track to get the extra research bumps, you give up a beetle to do that. So in order to kind of break even on it, you would have to play it once to get that beetle back, and then additional plays would net you more bumps.
That's a really good point.
That makes sense.
Yeah, no, that's a really good point.
If you're going to use it, like you almost want to buy it either at the beginning of the game or kind of at the end when you know that beetle getting it is actually going to do a thing. In the mid game, this can be a bit speculative, depending.
Lannister, you want to do one?
Sure. I'll go with my good old favorite Carino Jeans.
Carino Jeans.
Carino Jeans, 1 cube for on buy 2 Solari you get. It has access to the Emperor, and when grafted, you get a beetle bump with 1 persuasion on reveal. So I rated this card pretty high, but I also have it pretty low as a general card. So as a general card, it's a C tier to me, but if it's early game, I rank it as high as A. So
if you're playing as Rombo, it's like S++++.
or even
or
Leto. Yeah. So if it's turn 1, it's on the row, I'll rank it as A easily, just because the 2 Solari impact is so huge. That is able to fuel you for a lot of things like a Swordmaster or High Council or Dreadnoughts, anything of that nature, and it just fuels your economy so quickly. But thereafter, on turn 2 onwards, it's a dead card on hand because Emperor Track is actually a lot more popular than you'd expect. There's a lot of Emperor Access cards, and grafting is a pain in the butt to get. And as BlackSHadow and CJ mentioned, you're constantly flooding your deck with new cards. Just adding something that needs a grafting potential to get the beetle bump is a pain in the butt, in my opinion. So, I've touted this as a great card, but I also have to admit it's early game greatness, but mid to late game not so great. So.
Yeah, I would say that I think out of the entire Tleilaxu Row, this card probably has the worst agent box of the lot. And that's saying that given that Face Dance Initiate doesn't have anything in the agent box and Reclaim Forces doesn't have an agent box at all. And I don't think this is a worse one. It's so hard to try to get the grafting off on this, to get hold of that bump. It's so difficult. And it's typically not really worth it. If you can get hold of some cheap graph cards, then I guess fine. You maybe can get it off once. I guess that's nice, but it's really situational. And you do not, if you can't graph this card, like, what are you doing with it? Sending it to Wealth and getting 2 Solari feels pretty bad. Definitely, like, purchasing though for the two Solari on the spot is very underrated early game. And I do think a lot of people do miss the value that can give you in kind of getting a leg up on some things you would not be able to buy. Again, like that's like if you're going if you smuggle for example to go shipping, that's 7 Solari. but you want one more for your Swordmaster. Obviously, this is a way of trying to get around that, and there's other leaders that can do sort of similar things as well. There's definitely no doubt about that. And even just buying, if for Dreadnoughts and stuff like that, or maybe like as Leto to pay for some Mentat use early, your barn to find some Mentat use early, I can definitely see it. But yeah, like once it's like, if you're not getting it first round, this is a bit of a problem. Unless you have a specific reason for this. I did once, admittedly, buy Carino Jeans at the very end of the game to pay for Chome shares, which was pretty brutal because
That's
I
cool.
knew no one else was ever going to buy it. I was like, I think I'm pretty good here, and no one's going to see this coming. But again, it's so niche, this, unfortunately. I do have this in D as a result, because I mean, I accept at the beginning that Solari pretty useful, but there are also other ways to get hold of that Solari. And if it's if the opening skirmish is like a Solari skirmish, I mean, what you do with Carino Jeans, you don't really need it.
That's fair.
Unfortunately, I think there's just so many factors that work against Carino Jeans. Like, at best, it's nice. But
I have it in C, basically for the reasons that Lannister has said. I might move it down, but I think that the main thing about this card is you are trying to cut corners, very similarly to X137. You just want to like get a couple of extra actions out without having to spend an action. So getting to, I mean, this is like a trip to wealth for 1 cube, which is not nothing. I mean, that's pretty good. And that's why I'd say I'd keep it in C. The actual agent box is, I think I've never triggered it. I just think I usually trash it out of my deck after I play it to wealth or conspire later.
Yeah. It feels so bad because there's so many other cards you want to trash out your deck. Even that doesn't feel great. It's like a Seek Allies, except you're having to manually trash it yourself instead of getting rid of like a dagger or your recon or anything else in your deck. That is a problem. You lose an opportunity cost there.
Yeah.
I also have it in D tier. I did feel a little bit boxed in because it had to be lower than Face Dancer, Initiate, and Face Dancer, and I put those in C. I think, like Lannister was saying, there are some interesting early move combinations that you can do with Carino Jeans to make it worthwhile, and I think in those niche scenarios it can be good. But like your run-of-the-mill game, with like, I don't know, your standard Paul-esque leader, Carino Jeans just isn't going to get it done. You have to pay 1 specimen for that Solari, and then you get this, like you guys were saying, like semi-dead card in your deck that you're going to keep cycling through that you kind of want to crash out later. So I was just trying to think, would I take a like blank card in my deck for 2 Solari early in the game? Sometimes, kind of how this card works, but I don't think it's that great. So
I think if you're like in second position and you know that you've smuggled first round, you've smuggled second round, and getting Carino Jeans will get you your Swordmaster like right away, I think it's fine. Yeah. I think in that specific situation, if getting Carino Jeans gets you your Swordmaster round 2, I think it's totally fine to get. But that's about it.
Yeah.
And of course, there are several leaders who don't need the extra Solari because they either get the space for cheaper or they generate more cash. And again, like if there's any money in the skirmish, then you don't even really need Carino Jeans anyway. So yeah, that's about it really for Carino Jeans for me. It's just not enough.
All right, BlackShot, you want to do the next one?
Yeah, let's start looking at some fun cards here. Let's go for, I think it's probably going to be pretty high on everyone's rating list, Stitched Horror.
Yep.
So, Stitched Horror is a free specimen card. It has city access, it grafts, and when you graft it, you have a choice of 2 of either a water, a troop, a trash of a card, or a beetle. It also reveals for a water and a sword, although I don't think I've ever seen this card revealed ever.
No.
I have isn't it. I think this card, when I first looked at this deck, like I could see it and think this is gonna be pretty good. But I think once people have got their hands on it, Shoro, they realize that we've talked a lot on this channel about the concept of action compression. This is like it in a nutshell, really, isn't it? Yeah. Being able to graft it, send it to whatever you want, basically, that you can send with another card, and you can customize your own resources that you get out of it. I mean, what more could you want? Brutally effective. Very difficult to do anything about. I think I'm almost always taking beetles on this, and probably water are my go-tos for this, because it just powers so much else that you're doing. A very, very scary card, and I do see people will rush round one like Steel Suits research station just to try to get this card immediately.
Mm-hmm. Well, where do you have it in? Did you say? Are you
I've got this as one of my few S tier cards.
S-tier?
I think it's that brutally effective. And like the thing is that like I don't know that the troop for Stitched Horror, I don't hugely rate. There aren't many situations I would use that. The card trashing can also be pretty good early on. But yeah, for me, like when I'm using this, it's almost always the Beetle. And typically I go for the water unless I can find something else. I once managed to actually pair Stitched Horror with the Steel Suits manufacturer with the Fremen Alliance. It was pretty frightening.
It's pretty good.
That was pretty frightening. I was just research stationing like for days. It was basically every round. It was very, very scary. And it's just I think it's that good. One of the best cards in the game for me.
Yeah, I agree. I have it as an S tier. It's my second highest ranked card. Pretty close to the top one. It's interesting to hear you talking about using the Beetle in the water a lot. I end up using a lot of the trashing in this card. I feel like is just so flexible. It's just a Swiss Army knife kind of card. You just whatever you need. You need to trash a card, okay. You need some troops to go combat, okay. You want a quarter of a point, and, it's like that. This does everything you kind of need in the game. And if you combine it with some of the really nuts cards like Gola, you're just like way, way, way far ahead. But we'll get there. But the strength of this card is that it's so flexible. It only gives you a blue access, which is fine. But you'd just be as happy sending this with like a fold space or something like that anywhere. I mean, this is just such a good card.
Yep, I have it in S tier as well. Super good card. It has the city access like Lannister was talking about earlier. So even if you have to graph this to a convincing argument, you're still getting a pretty good city spot out of it. It's you pretty much always want to play it. There's never a scenario where you can't play it either. Most of the time you are able to just graft it to whatever you're going to do anyway. So it's just a card you always want to play when you get it. You're always happy when you draw it. And the rewards are awesome. Like you're saying, you can, if you want to go for like a really thin deck so you can hit a lot of strong combos over and over again, maybe you hit the trash early on. If you want to get a strong spice economy going, you go for the water. Generally, I am taking the Beetles just because they are like somewhat passive victory point generation, but I love this card. I think it's very good. And I remember when I first reacted to these cards, I was kind of lukewarm on it a bit. Look at me
very
now.
Unassuming, very unassuming. But once you get it in your hand, you start using it. It's just so fearsome, really scary.
For me, it's definitely an S tier. It's got Ariana's Signet ability, Beast Signet ability, Trash ability, Beetle Bump, City Access. It's got everything you need. As CJ said, it's a Swiss Army knife. It can do everything for you, and then some. It's just unbelievable. I pick this up every time. It's actually at the top of my S tier, even though above Gola. So I love it to death.
Is it always? One thing else. So is it always Beetles for you guys? Unless it's like the very end of the game, the Beetle won't help you.
For sure, it's always Beetle for sure.
Yeah,
but I'd say 95% of the time, unless I really need it for that combat or water
or something really specific. Yeah, agreed.
95% for Beetle.
Do you hate again? I have seen people willing to go against Steel Suits research stations just to get that. Is it worth doing that?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. 100%. It has so much momentum to it. The drafting capability of it enables so many other cards for you. Even something as simple as experimentation with Stitch Horror into research station.
Totally
that
good.
is so busted. People don't even realize that. Just the double research you get, and then you get the Beetle Bump as well as the water back. It's just
there's a reason the Tleilaxu Master Poll on our Discord has thousands of responses at this point.
Yeah,
specifically that reason, sort of thing. Yeah, the double research bump is truly fearsome.
Yeah, absolutely. So I have it at the top, even above Gola, and I have it above that because it doesn't rely on anything. Gola's strong, but this is basically whatever you want it to be, and it can help you win in any situation. It can speed up things, slow things down, can give you that economy you need. So it's got everything you need, and it never fails you. You're never unhappy with it unless it's on your reveal.
I also have it above Gola, actually. Strangely enough, even though I've complained about Gola so much, I think this card is just a better card. It's also easier to use in most cases, which is interesting. Should we move on to Gola?
I mean, we've talked about Gola a lot, and it is a bit of the elephant in the room. I suppose now's as good a time as any, right?
Sure. So, yeah, I have it in S tier, but below Stitch Tour. I just don't like the card. You probably all heard.
In case people don't know what this does, we should probably remind them.
Okay, yeah, it costs 3 specimens. It has a city access icon, and it says this is a graft card, and it has you copy the agent box of the grafted card, basically. So whatever the other grafted card's text box is, you get to copy. Now you don't get to copy red band trash things, and you don't get to copy like the Kwisatz. You get to send an agent thing because that's an inherent ability of the card, but you can do a lot of goofy things with this, like comparing it with Stitch Horror or combining it with Stitch Horror, where you get to do, 2 beetles and 2 water, or one of everything. That's fun. Or you can just combine it with, I don't know, anything. It's always good. Yeah, this card is just, I don't know. I don't like duplicate cards in games personally, so this is a personal preference thing. But I think it's a very strong card, and this is another one that you should be aware that you can hit up still suits and then research and try to hit 3 specimens right off the bat. So.
Yeah, this is the other card where people will be willing to still suit research to try and get this immediately. I need to make a quick mention to when we first talked about this in the first podcast, and I was harsh on this, and I think a lot of us were harsh on it. And at the time, I did apologize to Mr. Denon in Denon We Trust about this card. I can say I like it. I feel like my stance on Gola has softened slightly.
Yeah.
Ever so slightly. Maybe it's because I hate Tleilaxu Master more as time goes, and I just feel like resentful of that card. So like my hate has shifted across. I don't know, I don't know. Like the thing is, Gola, it does have some situations where Gola comes off in your hand, and it doesn't feel too great. Gola, of course, lives on other cards' agent boxes. And that means ultimately this card is somewhat reliant on what you pick up on the Tleilaxu Row. And if the Tleilaxu Row, for whatever reason, or the Imperium Row, for whatever reason, just isn't giving you very many effective, like particularly strong agent boxes, Gola does struggle a bit. Of course, if that is the one weakness of Gola.
Well,
now,
I mean, maybe it struggles.
It's a minor weakness. It's nothing that's going to come up particularly often because you've got your atomics, so you're going to be able to fish, and everyone else should be able to get hold of some decent agent boxes like throughout your game. You want to be picking them up anyways because, of course, you can be using your cards mainly for that. And this isn't even talking about, obviously, the city access for Gola means that you basically can't ever stop this card with whatever it's going to be combined with. We've talked a lot about Gola and like Mahayam. We've talked a lot about this card in Desert Ambush. Like when this card high rolls, it is brutally oppressive to the point where like you're almost stopping other people playing the game, which isn't good. Yeah. From just a general standpoint. But I will accept there are some times where Gola like can be a bit of a struggle and can be a bit of a trap. I think some people just buy Gola and rush to get Gola because they think, oh, it's Gola, I've got to go get it. But I think some people perhaps don't. They get the rush Gola, but they don't think why they're getting it. Again, if you're just combined with, like, say, experimentation, that's not terrible. Like, getting those double research bumps is pretty good. But you should still get Gola with an idea of what you're actually intending to do with it. Not just get Gola for the sake of getting Gola. That's the only one thing I would say for this card. But still, like, when this high rolls, like, this is just disgusting and virtually unstoppable.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to be the dissenter here. I think Gola is the absolute best card above Stitched Horror.
Yeah.
I think when you buy Gola, worst case, even if you buy it into just your base deck and don't acquire any more cards, you're getting double research icons, you're getting double signet rings, which you can hit those like pretty consistently, and that's just base, not
Good
buying
point.
other cards.
A lot of people forget about double signet rings, 100%.
Yeah, so from that perspective, it's still like a really solid card, and this is the only card that can like straight up break the game and win you the game on its own. You hit this with long reach, Jessica,
I mean,
Smuggler Stopper. Like there are a lot of great cards that you can get consistently with this card, and even if you don't get them, it's good on its own. I think this card is amazing. I would rush to get this early in the game if it was available. I think Stitch Star is probably is like it's consistent and it's good, but I don't think it has the same potential to like kind of ruin a game like
Yeah,
Gola
no,
does.
that's
So
true. That's true. Maybe I'm just trying to erase those memories out of my brain
yeah.
a
No.
little bit.
They need to be seared into your mind. You need to never forget. You need to like have pictures on the wall of all the most grotesque things you've ever seen Gola do to remind you the pain that this could inflict. You know, you're here forever.
Yeah, my brain. I'm sorry,
Major
guys.
But yeah, it's
Stitch Horror and
brutal.
Gola is that when Stitch Horror works, it's like okay, it's great and it's like consistent. Gola, when it works, it really, really works, and it does so in an unfun way for the viewers. Like for the user himself, it's awesome, right? But when Mother Mohaim gets a double tap on you, the whole table's groaning and moaning.
There's not much you can do about it. And the thing we should mention about, so again, we talked about this again a couple of podcasts ago, but bear remembering, especially with Mother Mohaim, the city access on the Gola is complete. A lot of people miss that the city access that Gola gives you. But for cards like Desert Ambush, like the real like high rolling cards that have like these really super oppressive, can't really do much about agent boxes, having Gola with city access means that these cards that they typically have these really strong agent boxes don't have a lot of access. That's kind of the trade-off. You know, Motherheim obviously to make people discard 2 cards, that's really gross. But there's only 4 spaces in the game she can go to, and 2 of them cost a fair amount of spice. So there's times where you can only send 2 places. So if you see Mahamine getting set up, we had it in the tournament actually in one game where Mahamine was getting set up. The players can block that, and if Mahamine gets blocked, like you're still revealing for 2 persuasion, 2 spice. You don't hate it, but obviously it can be stopped that agent ability. But with Gola, like you can't block 5 spaces. You can't block 6 spaces. There's nothing you can do. So if someone has that potential to use Gola and these cards, there's basically no defense. And then like Desert Ambush, like if you know they're going to Gola and Desert Ambush, then you're not even putting troops in anymore, and it just messes with your game so much. And then they reveal, and they didn't even have it. You know, stuff like that. You become scared, and you start chasing ghosts, and it just gets kind of unplayable, really. And it's not a great experience. But yeah, like if you want to win games, Gola's not going to get you far wrong. It's pretty brutal.
All right, I'll probably move it up a little bit in my ranking. Obviously, I'm now remembering situations I shouldn't have. Thanks a lot, guys.
I would say the one thing I would say for Gola, and this is speculative. If this didn't have city access, I'd probably make it an A tier. I think the city access just lets that real high tier of what it can do. It like sends it to another stratosphere because you can't stop it. But if this didn't have city access, like Usurp doesn't have any access, that might be enough for like those really crazy things. Like at least the table, like if they know it's coming, can say, look, we're about to get completely royally screwed here. We need to do something about it. Now, it's very rare to have a table decide, like, collectively, they're going to stop something happening. It almost never happens. But when it does, Gola could well be a reason. And ultimately, people do not like discarding 4 cards from their hand and having to finish the round with, like, 2 agents in their hand. It's not a good feeling. I will still remember the one game, I didn't have it, but I saw it, where someone had Weirding Way, Mother Mahaim, and Gola. What do you do?
That's nice.
Yeah.
What on earth do you do about that?
I will say that this is the one card that makes In the Tanks from the Tanks like playable if you get it grafted.
Oh yeah, Gola from
it's,
the Tanks.
It's a highliner for nothing.
It's a highliner for no resources. That is very scary. And again, that's the thing as well. Gola even takes these weak cards that you would struggle with, and all of a sudden, like they're looking pretty good. Gola and Carino Jeans, like that's 2 Beetlebums. That's not bad.
Yeah, that's why I don't like it as a card.
Stuff like that. But yeah, so that's what Go does. It takes the weak cards, the weak Asian abilities, and makes them pretty solid. And it takes the strong Asian abilities and just sends them to like the moon. Gola's Scientific Breakthrough is another one to talk about as well. We haven't talked about Scientific Breakthrough, but that's another absolutely putrid combo.
Yeah.
Absolutely disgusting.
Well, why don't we do that?
Yeah, I guess that is still about
Let's
Scientific
jump in
Breakthrough.
there. Scientific Breakthrough. Where do you have it, BlackSHadow?
So Scientific Breakthrough, free specimen card. It has access to everything that's not a faction. Its agent box has a research icon on it, which isn't too bad. But the main thing with Scientific Breakthrough is that if you can get to the end of the research track and play this card, you can trash it for a victory point.
Yeah.
That's pretty significant. It's an investment. There's no question about that, but people see victory point icons on agent boxes and cards, and people get very excited. It also reveals for Persuasion and a Sword, it should be noted, but again, you're not really revealing any of these cards specifically. I have this in A tier. I think any card that like offers you victory points, I find it difficult to really rate it much lower than that. And it cares for your card's Scientific Breakthrough. If you think about the research track, so the research track has, I think is it 8 or 9 steps? I think it's 8 from the beginning. I could be wrong. I think it's 3 to get to the first marker, and then 5 more to get to the end of the track. I might have my math wrong there. I apologize if I do. But of course, there are some research skips. So a card like Scientific Breakthrough, if you get this early, you are completely justified taking like the double research skip at the top of the track, and then suddenly you're going from 8 to 6. And of course, you're playing Scientific Breakthrough, which is also giving you research skips as well. Very effective. This also, again, like pairs well with some cards like Graph, because it gives you that extra flexibility. Having no faction access isn't great, but even just sending this card to shipping is pretty darn good. And obviously, you can pair it with like experimentation and other stuff as well. Gola as well. If you can get this to the end of a track and get Gola and Scientific Breakthrough somehow, you can play both cards, and you can trash both cards to get 2 victory points. That's pretty scary. A tier for me. I don't think it's S. I think the investment is enough of a commitment that if you haven't really gone down that path and this card comes up mid-game, you can't really justify buying it. Although I have seen people buy it before as a block. But like this card pairs anything with experimentation icons, the what's the graph card with the faction with the research icon? I forget its name.
The graph with the research?
There's a graph for research in the normal deck.
The couple.
The researcher. I can't think of its name. Tleilaxu Research.
Oh,
Like
Tleilaxu Researcher. Yeah.
Tleilaxu Researcher is good. Scientific Breakthrough and Tleilaxu Master is just have a victory point on the house. This card can be pretty hard to stop, but if you don't commit down the research and this peels off, it is a bit of a problem, and you can't make a ton of use out of it. And trying to use this card and get it late, and then rushing the research to try to get that victory point is actually a lot harder to do than it looks. So, not quite S tier for me, but I think A is. I think it's very solid. I would much rather have this card than not.
Yeah, I agree with that. I have it in A tier as well. I like the fact that it has the city access for research, which is something experimentations kind of lack. So as a combat junkie, it helps me, and it adds to the third action being able to do an experimentation. So you could do first action into smuggling or interstellar, and then vice versa, and then you can still do it a third time if you're lucky enough to a city spot. So it accelerates it really quickly, or it gives you flexibility that experimentation doesn't allow you. So obviously the VP point is not to be diminished, but yeah, it's just really good on that end.
Combine this with Research Station as well is also very scary. It's a good way of like that last minute catapult. Like if you're trying to find the extra research bump to be able to trash this, like setting Scientific Breakthrough to Research Station and getting those last 2 bumps and then trashing the card on top of the victory point, very good. But I do apologize. Carry on.
Yeah. So A tier as well. I agree with everything you guys said about it, so I won't rehash that. It is kind of the Ixian engineer of the Tleilaxu Row, where it will get you that point. And it brings up the other conundrum of if somebody else is at the end of the track and this pops up later in the game, like having to make the play to stop somebody else at the cost of potentially losing a point from a beetle bump can make for some predicaments, I will say. Blocking plays usually aren't that enticing to people, but yeah, I think it's a good card.
I have it at the lower end of S tier. I think it's very good, but I think it's one of the cards that you could potentially look at trashing your research card out of your deck for, your experimentation card or whatever it's called. That because this is just like a better version of that, and it eventually gets you a point. You're probably not going to play 3 of them. I mean, maybe, but you might not need 3 of them anyway. It's not that hard to get across the track if you like focus on it. I love the extra spaces here. It gives you a lot of flexibility. Yeah, you already mentioned the Gola combo getting 2 points, which is another stupid broken thing you can do. It shouldn't exist, but it does. Yeah, I like it a lot. I think just any cards that say you get a point are very high for me. So top of A, bottom of S, something like that. How about our good old friend, the Slig Farmer?
I have a feeling we're going to vary a lot on this. I figured out of all the cards in the deck, I figured it's either this one or another one. I think we might vary wildly on Slig Farmer. I think it's because Slig Farmer is a card that varies wildly in itself.
I have it at B. I have a B tier card here. I think it's fine. I don't play Yuna that much. I should explain what it does. It is a 2-cost specimen card that has only access to the Landsred, the green symbol. And it says gain 1 Solari for each icon the grafted card has. Is that right? The grafted card.
Yeah. This is a graph card. You graph something
It's
else.
a graph card.
How many that card has.
And it also has a pay ability 5 Solari for a beetle. And it reveals for 1 persuasion. Yeah, I have this in B tier. The reason is I'm not a huge fan of green access graft cards in general. I think getting Solari is fine. And so I'll pick it up. It's definitely an investment, and you're going to want to be like maybe an Elesa or have something else to use it with. Maybe like your ring is totally fine just to get 3 extra Solari. There's nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's just gets money. It's really reliable.
Yeah. It's 2 words here. Fold space. That is the trick to this, right? You want to graph this with cards that have as much access to everywhere as possible. As it turns out, fold space can go wherever you so fancy. Yeah, that is crazy powerful. Basically, you're turning fold space into a send it wherever you want, gain 2 Solari, and get a beetle. Or gain 7 Solari. I have done before, sent Slig Farmer to like get Swordmaster for free with a fold space card. It's pretty disgusting, you know. And because of that reason, like Slig Farmer, like with Elazari Kaz, has a lot more value because, of course, she can just produce these fold space cards when she wants for signet ring ability and paying for them, which is really strange. You know, you basically pay a small investment to try and combine these up, and you're just like printing money and you're off to the races. Of course, however, because of the way this card works, it is reliant on the Imperium Row. If there's a lot of cards that are potentially really strong but don't have a lot of access, you know, like your Gurney Hallex, you know, your Stilgars, stuff like that, which are very, very good cards but don't really go many places, Slig Farmer is a problem. Because the most you can do is combine it with like a Diplomacy and get on 4 slide, which is not bad by any stretch of the imagination. But you got to bear in mind this is also taking up a card in your deck, and the only thing you're doing with this is getting Solari and then later converting that into beetles. Like, this is not going to help you buy Spice Must Flows. It's not really going to help you like with research. It's going to probably impede you with visiting factions more often because you've got more cards in your deck. So Slig Farmer, I think, does have some issues, and it does have some effects in your deck that people, I think, don't think about sometimes. But yeah, like if you can get hold of some fold space access early and combine these up, like that extra 7 Solari is absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I ended up waffling a lot on A versus B tier for Slig Farmer. Ended up landing on B. Like you guys were saying, the natural flexibility or synergy with Alicia Kaz is awesome, being able to get all that Solari. And also good with other Solari-dependent leaders like Ilban or Yuna who have uses for that extra Solari going forward.
Mm-hmm.
And the nice thing is, usually after you get your High Council Swordmaster, the extra Solari you get in the game's kind of useless to you. So this gives you a way to dump that Solari. And you know what? Worst case scenario, revealing it for 1 persuasion isn't the worst thing in the world. And the nice thing is, as far as helping you get Spice Must Flow in the late game, helping you get that High Council that maybe you wouldn't have been able to get otherwise through the Solari from this would, in that way, kind of help you get some Spice Must Flows. But I think it can definitely miss if you don't have the right deck for it.
Yeah, I think one thing that needs to consider is that you don't have to spend the slide for the beetle bumps. I think that is a misconception. I think a lot of people just do it because it's a thing they can do. It's on the card and they feel that they should do it. But I don't actually think you always should. Just having that slide for other reasons is totally fine. Like if it's a tier 3 combat and you've got flagships, for example, I mean, There you go. You send that to like 100 diplomacy to hardy warriors. You're suddenly turning 2 troops into 5, and instead of like getting a beetle bump with your Solari, you're gonna try and win a combat for 2 victory points. That's pretty huge. Stick farmer can also be even stuff economic supremacy, stuff like that as well. I mean, that's one thing I would say. Don't just get the beetle bump because it's there. It isn't always the right call. But yeah, I think the value of this, like, I've got it B as well. I think it can vary anywhere from like a high A to kind of like even going towards like C tier, like kind of encroaching on D sometimes. I mean, it varies wildly, but I think to say it is a B overall is fine. But don't treat it like a face dancer, whereas a face dancer is kind of fairly consistent and like you're happy to get it kind of whenever it comes in your hand. Slick Farm is a card you need to use a lot more selectively, and is a card you are absolutely terrified of drawing late. Like as your last card draw, you go to Arakeen, for example, and you pull Slick Farmer. It feels absolutely terrible. You're like, oh great, well that's not doing a lot for me, and I've got to wait to find it again to get any value out of it. So it's in the same ranking for me as Face Dancer, but for completely different reasons. Don't just get it because it's there. Justify why you're getting it, and use it appropriately, and it will serve you well. But you need to think about what you're doing and why you're doing it.
I had it ranked a lot lower than you guys. I had it ranked as C, and the reason
Ooh.
for that is 2 syllables. Felk Dav. So,
Oh
Felk Dav
boy!
tests this out as one of the best cards out there. I've seen him fall face flat on it 4 or 5 times in a row, and I'm just like, yeah, I still see it the same way. It's so clunky, and in a way, it's got maybe Signet Ring gives you 3 Solar here and there, but it just gets in the way a lot of times. There were so many times where Felk had it in his draw, and it just got in his way. It just like didn't feel good. Like aside from, as BlackSHadow mentioned, when it gets the fold space action there, it's great stuff. But outside of that,
this card with your starting deck is bad.
Yeah.
There is the best card you've got is your diplomacy, and even though it's only 4 Solari, which is not amazing, this card thrives upon what else you buy in the game and what you can trash out your starting deck. Like Stick Farm with Armor Decaz is also very scary because this gives you access to say like Mentats. You can get those actions earlier. It pays your Swordmaster, so you can start trashing those cards at your deck passively. And then Slick Farmer is turning a lot more reliably with cards with greater faction access that you've been making a point of buying, visiting Fold Space to get those, buying them with whatever else you need to do. So, I mean, again, that's where Slick Farmer, it lives or dies in what else you buy around it. If you just keep drawing it with, like, your starting deck, and you decide not to trash your starting deck, and you're not going to do that very much, you probably should avoid Slick Farm. But if you know you're going to trash a load of cards out of those, and there's a lot of stuff like Fufi Hawat on it, for example, or anything like that out in the opening row, and you're going to get a few of those, then Stick Farm will certainly work. But yeah, if you're going to get this, like, you've got to be scared of your opening deck. You need to trash those daggers. You need to trash those recons. You need to get those out of your hand as soon as possible to get them out of Stick Farm.
I was just going to say, like, Elisa Ekaz would be a great addition for this card. Just because
by far the best, yeah.
The hold space out there, so I'm
not
going to say it's complete garbage, but yeah, in a whole, as a general, it's just really clunky in my opinion. That's why I rate it so low.
Yeah, I agree with you.
I fail with it.
Yeah, I agree with you. The only reason I have it in B tier is because I have not that much experience with it. It's one of those cards that I just kind of look at and go, I mean, I usually have a solution for a Solari, and this is just an extra way of getting Solari. I don't really need it most of the time. I know that Yuna loves it. It powers Yuna's ring. It's great with Appropriate, like those kinds of things.
Yeah.
But like it only adds, adding the green symbol is such a big deal. Like it's not great to have more green symbols in your deck most of the time. Like you only want like 2, maybe 3. You start with 3. You're going to probably call a dagger, but then if you end up buying like another thing, like you don't want the X137 because then it overlaps too much. And I find that this card just overlaps a little too much in most of the cases. I'd generally rather have a Face Dancer, genuinely rather have a Face Dancer Initiate or a regular Face Dancer over it. I don't know. It's okay. I have seen people do some really nutty things with it, and so I keep it in B because I agree that it can be very strong if you get the extra Solari. You need it for Dreadnoughts or whatever. But it's such a things have to align perfectly card. I don't like those. So how about the promo card Piter?
Yeah,
What
we
is
should
his
praise
full
about
name?
Pie. Yeah,
What is his full
definitely.
name? Piter something
Pie,
Twisted
Pie,
Mentat.
Pie
Genius
de
Advisor.
Braise.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Genius. Oh, Pie Genius Advisor is on the card.
Yeah.
Yeah, this is a promo card. It's not found in your normal decks. Although us on our community, we used to have it in our standard decks. It isn't actually a feature of that, so just bear in mind. But yeah, Pie's pretty good, isn't he?
Yeah. What does he do?
He has he's a free coster, investment wise. He has council and mining or shipping access, the triangles and the pentagons. Its agent box is pretty crazy. Lose a troop from wherever on the board, or wherever in your supply or anything like that, and you can draw 2 cards and get a research bump. That is crazy value.
Yep.
That is absolutely nuts. It does reveal for a persuasion and a sword, although you never want to reveal this. I've got this S tier. I think this is a ruthlessly efficient card. There are a lot of leaders that this is great for. You do have to bear in mind you need to get hold of those troops somehow, which can be a bit of a problem if you're not paying attention to that. But Pilot Genius Advisor is a nasty card. And like there's so many leaders that can make so much use of this. It's an amazing spice with flow generator. It gets you towards the end of the research track as well, so you can make some beetle pushes. As long as you keep on top of making sure you've got troops in your garrison, this is nasty.
Agreed. S tier, really good card. One of the nice things, it does have orange/yellow access. So even if you don't have the troops, if you have interstellar shipping access, you can just grab the troops first and then sacrifice them to Piter, which some people don't see sometimes. I think the access isn't great, but given the fact that you can draw 2 cards and get a research bump for just 1 troop, like I'm fine with going to tech negotiation or a desert spot and kind of going to a less efficient spot just to get all of that card cycling you get out of this card. It's just really good.
The trick is getting some. If you can get some graft access alongside to help Piter in those occasional spots where you draw him and it's a bit awkward to get him off, and that just limits those issues. Like if you can get Fremen access, you've got water hit hardy warriors. If you can go conspiring, if you can go Highliner, for example, if you can go Highliner 1 time during the game and just not send any of those troops in, Piter Genius Advisor is funded for the rest of the match. You don't have to worry about it. Like it's just, I have literally seen someone once get Piter Genius Advisor, and they round 3 Highlinered and didn't send any troops in, just garrisoned the lot and just used it as Piter fodder for the rest of the game. It was absolutely crazy. I've never seen that before.
Wow.
But it worked, and they were just like, at the end of the game, they were just printing spiceless flows like it was nothing. Absolutely nuts. I was like, you know what? I think you're insane for doing that. I don't think it's a good idea, but this time it looked cool and it kind of worked, so fair play.
I have this at A tier, top of A tier, but I totally agree. It's one of the best cards in the game. Probably should be S tier. It's a research station for a troop. That's kind of so stupid. Like, why does this card exist?
Yeah, that's like, is the research station for a troop. That is the thing. I can understand why you might put it at 80. It's just about, I think the trap of this card is if you pick this, you've got to accept that you're not going to be investing in combat very much.
That's a big deal, and I think that combat went up in value with immortality. So that's one of my hang-ups a little bit, but it's really good.
One problem. Yeah, I do agree that, especially because like if you get this, and the thing is, not only do you know that you're not going to be getting particularly invested in combat, the entire table knows that as well. And that is a problem. Like, if you're sitting there with a garrison of 4 or 5 troops, and it's a kind of an tempting combat, like, normally people can be like, well, is he going to get committed? Is he not? Do I go in heavy? Do I not? But if they got Piter Genius Advisor, they can kind of assume that you're not going to bother because you want to be using Piter for its agent box. So that is a problem as well. I do accept that. It's not a big one in comparison to what this allows you to do. And I have had situations where I've been like scrambling just to hit like Carthag or Arakeen just to get a troop to then use Piter, and then at that point, then people will start like going to Mentat. They'll hit shipping, might start hitting some mining spots, and Piter can get a bit cumbersome to use on occasions. So you've got to be careful about that.
Yeah.
I tend to find what I end up doing is I'll use Piter, and then I'll just kind of reveal my experimentations. And just reveal them basically for like and gather troops in garrison. Like you've got to make sure you've got a way of getting troops in garrison. Be it is, However, you can do that. So for Helena, obviously it's amazing because Helena can't be blocked from city spaces. Whenever she wants them, she can go get them. Pygenius Visor with Beast Raban is also actually really underrated because, of course, he can produce them with his Signet Ring, which you can't do a lot about. You got to be careful of tempo a bit. And obviously, it seems weird using Paita with Beast Raban, but because he has so much potential in combat, anyways, like you can sometimes get away with Paita a little bit. Or what you can do is you can go in really heavy into combat, kind of scare everyone away from it, and then your last action suddenly just use Paita Go Tech Negotiation or something, and you get that benefit out of it. That could be really, really tricky.
I remember again going back to Felkdav. He had the Tleilaxu Master, and we were trying to control him in place. And I had Test of Humanity. The other player had the Mohaim. We made him discard 3 cards. We're like, oh, we're golden, set. What did he do? He was Ilban. He used Piter, outside unrelenting assault, drew 7 cards, and we're like, wow, that just offset everything we just did.
Yeah. Yeah, it's pretty gross, right?
Next, and that was it. Well,
the good thing is instead of buying 2 Spice of Slows, he was only probably buy 1.
So I guess he wrote his entire hand in the end. So.
Oh well, then in that case, then yeah, you're completely hosed. Then you should just give up and concede and move on to your next.
That's funny.
S tier for me.
Yeah.
S tier, that makes sense.
All right, I'm moving it up. So one thing that's cool about this card is it's probably not very well known, but in one of the prequel books by Brian Herbert, Prelude to Dune, it's this is what this card's from. This is the first, or maybe first, Piter de Vries who discovers the. No, this is the second one. The second Piter who discovers, who pre-Piter discovered the plot about Jessica, giving birth to Paul, and that's a Harkonnen, and then like he gets killed by Mohaim, and then like they order a new one. They order a new Piter from the Tleilaxu. So that's
you do. He just went down to like his local Target. Is like, I'll have a Piter, please.
Yeah. It's just right off the line. Yeah. So this is the reordered Piter, I believe, because it's a Tleilaxu card. So this is the one that, I don't know. That's kind of a cool little thematic thing.
Hashtag Dune Lore of the Day. Hashtag go to your local Target and see what they got in store.
Ask for Piter by name.
I will do. What's an interesting one? Beguiling Pheromones.
Yeah.
So this one costs you 3 specimens. It has access to blue and. Are we saying yellow or orange for these? I go back. Yellow. Okay. It's a graft card. If you send an agent to a faction board space this turn, trash one of the grafted cards and gain an additional influence with that faction. Reveals for 1 persuasion and 1 dagger. I really, really like this card. I think this card is a ton of fun. This is another one where I kind of was like between S and A. I ended up going with A, but it is so strong. You can graft it with fold spaces over and over again if you don't want to get rid of your diplomacy early, which you usually don't want to. You can also graft it to cards like Power Play or Treachery and gain 3 bumps with a faction. Even if you don't want to trash any cards, let's say you want to get the bare minimum out of this, it's a Power Play for 3 specimens, and Power Play is a very good card. So I like this card a lot. I think it can make for some very big single round persuasion, or not persuasion, influence steals. And if you see, this is one of the cards you have to keep track of if someone else buys it. You cannot ignore the availability of this card when you're playing the faction access game.
So
I would say that this card still gives me nightmares. This is going to be a throwback to the days of when BlackSHadow won't let me forget about that Leto turn 6 win.
Never forget the Lido game.
Never
the immortal Lido game.
I am going to pass it over to him, but I just want to say I'm going to sulk in this corner and cry a little bit while BlackSHadow tells me this recounting the story of how he destroyed me in turn 6. So I'm just going to walk away for a second. You can take care of this, BlackSHadow.
I remember 100% well now. It's been a little while. So yeah, it was one of the early Immortality games that we played. Basically, the moral of the story was I took on Lido. I think it was like 2nd position or something, and I decided I was not going to play Lido as a chase, and I figured I was just going to absolutely just go for it. So opening combat was a skirmish with victory point. I went all in because he was playing his Romba, because of course Lance was playing his Romba. And the one problem with Romba is obviously he needs time to get up and running. So I was like, I'm not going to allow that. I'm going to absolutely bomb combats early that are victory points, and then I'm just going to completely shelter and and just completely isolate myself from everyone else and use my signet ring to pick up the various victory points and just end the game as quickly as possible. First 2 combats were victory points, won both of them. Lannister knew what was going, but by then it was already too late, and I just absolutely just bombed factions, took 3 alliances, and just won the game in 6 rounds, and no one could do anything about it. Just completely unstoppable. It was one of the best games I've ever played in my life. I had shifting allegiances as well. Yeah, it was pretty gross.
The saddest part was I won the last combat, but by then he just like completed his friendship.
It was way too late. Like again, because the great thing is because then I think you picked up the detonation devices because you had to chase, and then of course at that point everyone then had to stop me. I was like, I'm just gonna sit here and pick up my victory points. No one can stop me, and everyone has to try and stop you from winning because they can't stop me and just hope that I don't make it. It was absolutely glorious. Going back to bargaining pheromones, anecdote side, I don't actually have this amazingly high. Anecdotes aside, I've got this straddling the BC tier, believe it or not. And again, I really do like this card. I think it's a lot of fun. The problem with beguiling pheromones is that it is pricey. And the problem is that there are times you'll pick beguiling pheromones and it just completely sputters out and does nothing. The problem you've got with beguiling is that it needs to be grafted with cards that have faction access. Problem. By the time you get this card, you've probably played your Seek Allies, and so you've got your Diplomacy card. That is 1 card out of 10. So you need to buy some faction access cards out of the row. Problem. What if the row just isn't giving you faction access cards? What if those faction access cards you're getting cost you 5 persuasion, 6 persuasion, 7 persuasion? Beguiling pheromones is amazing if you can get cheap faction access cards, be it Guild Administrator, be it what's some other good examples off the top of my head? I'm trying to think here. Yeah. Obviously, stuff like if you can compare this and combine this with a laser and get hold of fold space cards, beguiling pheromones is absolutely fearsome. But what do you do if you've got a 13 card deck and your first 5 cards you draw your faction access and you don't draw this? What do? You start chasing to try and find it. What if you can't chase it? What if you don't have a spice to get selective breeding? What if Arakeen gets blocked to you? You can't draw these cards, for example, and you just don't find beguiling pheromone. All of a sudden, beguiling can become a bit of a trap, and when it does that, it feels terrible because it is pricey, and if you can't find faction access to graft it with, this card does nothing. It's basically a blank. But when it works and you are able to supplant it with those cheap faction access cards, this card is very scary. Beguiling pheromones, I think in that game, I think I had I think it was that game where I used beguiling pheromones with Imperial Spy, I think it was, to get the because it trashed itself, which still procs beguiling pheromones, just to get like a faction alliance out of that or something like that, or protect something.
Wait, does it do that? No, it doesn't do that.
Well, beguiling pheromones doesn't trash the card as such. It allows you to trash it, but I'm pretty sure beguiling, if the other card trashes as part of the action, I think it still procs beguiling. I could be wrong.
I don't think that works that way.
But I'm fairly sure how this works, and if Mr. Den's listening, I'm sure he can answer that.
Well, we'll have LSR tell us what's actually there.
LSR will get us there. It might be on the FAQ. Anyways, we're waffling here. Beguiling pheromones, when it high rolls, is absolutely fearsome. With power play and treachery, like, it's the dreaded triple bump that you can do absolutely nothing to defend against, and you just got to accept you're going to lose alliances. Like, if Long Reach comes out, like, you can kind of justify defending alliances more, because although Long Reach is very strong, it doesn't have those sudden bursts of faction access, and those sudden bursts to steal alliances. It just puts pressure everywhere. Beguiling pheromones, like, if you can get it with power play, like, what do you do? Like, are you really going to spend that time going to faction spaces to defend an alliance, protect, which might not even be attacked? And then if they don't go for that because you ward them off, then what were you doing this way? Beguiling pheromones can cause all sorts of meta issues, but I can't put it in A tier. I think this card can lowball enough times where it feels really bad. You've got to go all in on faction access with beguiling pheromones. If you kind of half and half it, you risk this just completely not doing a lot at all. And of course, if you're going all in on cheap faction access cards, what are you buying? You know, and what else are you doing? How else are you getting these victory points? You know, if you're going all in, you're saying, I want 2 alliances, absolutely minimum, if not 3 alliances. And that's pretty hard to do, because if you pick up beguiling pheromones, people will hit factions more often. They won't let you do this just for free. And if they do, then I guess it comes down on them. So, really hard to rate for me. it's probably a B tier for me, but this can low rank like a C, and this can sometimes act like an S tier card. It's wild in how much value you're going to get out of this, and it depends really how much time and effort you're going to put in, and partially how lucky you are with your card draw.
So I think this is an A tier card. I think it's very strong. But I don't. First of all, I'm just reading the card's text again. Trash one of the grafted cards and gain an additional influence with the faction.
Yes, that's the thing. So Beguiling Pheromones, you can trash itself. I forgot about to say that. You don't have to trash the other card. You can trash Beguiling Pheromones itself and keep the other card if you want.
Right. So I'm saying if you trash the card with like that for an effect, then you would have to trash Beguiling Pheromones to get this effect. So I don't think that it works if you use the another card's effect to trash it. It's its own like cost within text. So I don't think it works that way.
Oh,
anyway,
cool.
but the amount of times that this card has like saved me is pretty high. Like the faction tracks are very competitive and people soar up them pretty fast, and it's largely due to cards like this and a couple others. But I feel like this card just benefited a lot from the Ix expansion, putting a lot of pressure on the Spacing Guild, because now you have an even better reason to go to Spacing Guild, like you really needed one before, to go to Fold Space, get some Fold Space cards, and then just like throw them in with this, and do a bunch of stuff, get a card, get your whatever your space effect is, get an extra bump, I mean, those things are pretty not that hard to do, and I don't know. I think this is a very good card, and yeah.
You bring up a good point here, actually. So this is a good point. I was going to one of the other cards we've got to talk about. Yeah, this card does change value depending on if you're using the the Ix expansion or not, because the Ix expansion does give a lot of faction access cards. Immortality does give a fair amount as well, for that matter.
Mm-hmm.
But it also does again change the value of like how much you're going to be hitting factions and what faction you're going to. For example, if the Ix expansion exists, like, someone is going to get 6 persuasion almost certainly on the Spacing Guild, because there's a lot of competition. People want to fight for that spacing for the shipping access, that sort of thing. But of course, if shipping doesn't exist, that changes the value of that faction, for example, and people might fight more heavily for the Fremen or the Bene Gesserit and stuff like that. So you do have to be just a little bit wary if you're playing with Ix or not. Might change how you apply this card a little bit. The one thing I would also say for Beguiling Pheromones is I don't think it's worth buying this card if your intention is to just simply buy this and trash it alongside your diplomacy and keep your diplomacy. That seems a complete waste to me. I don't know if you guys agree or not.
I kind of disagree with you. I think it's just a power play case. Like, it didn't cost you any persuasion. I think I would definitely do that.
Spend that for, you think there's so many good free cube cost cards out there. Stitched Horror, Pie to go. Even just free cubes for a Beetle Bump, it's not that bad. I don't know if I can justify it enough just to get Beguiling Pheromones, just to try to draw. If you buy no other faction cards over the course of the game and none are really coming out, I can't justify Beguiling Pheromones to try and draw it alongside your diplomacy immediately to turn it into a double bump. Well, I don't think it's worth it.
I mean, there's a lot of ifs in what you're saying. I don't know if that's...
There is. I accept that. But that's what I say with Beguiling. I think it's a card you've kind of got to go all in. If you're going to get this, you've got to say to yourself, right, any cheap faction access card, I'm just going to buy. Or a vast majority of them. And you're going down that route.
I like it for 2 different reasons. The first is, as CJ said, it's effectively a power play. And second of all, it allows you to trash cards.
Yes.
Even though it's like not necessarily a diplomacy you might want to trash, but it allows you to thin down the deck. Like, maybe I'm done with Face Dancer or Face Dancer Initiate, or maybe I'm done with the spice card for what it's called, the
one that goes to like the Spacing Guild.
Yeah.
That
one. Like, maybe I'm done with it. Maybe I just want to get rid of it and get it out of my deck. That really helps in deck thinning as well as getting the bumps necessary. So I see it as 2 benefits that don't necessarily get utilized as much as often as possible, but it can definitely help you in those situations where you're trying to deck them at the same time too.
Yep.
I would say, ironically, Beguiling Pheromones is probably Krinogene's best friend.
Yeah,
it is.
It probably is its best friend, because you're getting that Beetle out the graft, you're getting a passive bump the Emperor, which is always good. I think typically if you play a game of Dune Imperium, you want to try and find like 1 passive bump on the Emperor track. You don't want to like hard way it the entire way. finding one is good, so it gets you that, and then it also lets you trash the card once you bought it for 2 Solari. So stuff like that I would definitely say. But again, the only thing you'll bear in mind is obviously you're trashing these cards, but you're buying them in the first place. It's not like you're trashing your starting cards. Like you've had to spend time to buy the cards, to draw them, to play them, and then get rid of them again. So it varies a lot. It depends how you're going to approach the game. And obviously some characters like Tessia Vernius, if she can get this, that's pretty scary.
Yeah.
As well, definitely. But I wouldn't just buy it because it's there. It's a card that, for me, I've got to sit and think, right, am I going to get a lot of use out of this? Can I justify it? Can I think of a better use for my free specimen cubes? Like, when it's good, like, it's brutal.
So
but I've seen enough times where it hasn't been effective enough, I don't think.
there's an interesting, there's been a long-standing debate about whether you play your Seek Allies or your Diplomacy in round 1. And
Yes.
I honestly think that having a lot more experience now, the right thing is to hold your Seek Allies because your access is better later on. And even if it hurts your buy, your persuasion. And I think that's I think it's better generally, but I think that Beguiling Pheromones funnels you into that play, which is beneficial to you in the long run. To hold your Seek Allies and then use it with Beguiling, I think is a better way to go. Like especially if you get this round 1, it's very unlikely you're going to get this round 1. So this is probably like a round 2 or 3 card. So you're going to probably see it once, maybe twice in the game, if that. So I think that generally I would err on the side of trying to play a little more conservatively with my cards so that I have better access, get a couple of fold spaces. And I don't think it's that hard to line it up with a faction access card. There's always like those faction access cards that nobody wants. Like there's the Emperor one that infiltrates that I like a lot. What's it called?
Court Intrigue.
The Court Intrigue, or any of those. It's great with those because you don't really want those cards in your deck for a long period of time. Yeah, I'd even like trash, like after a while I'd probably trash the Contaminator. Just use it to get a couple of bumps, like Steel and Alliance, maybe trash that card out of my deck I'm not going to need. Although that one is like maybe not, because having access to Fremen late is good. But anyway, yeah, I think it's good.
And yeah, I will say I don't think you have to go all in on Beguiling Pheromones. I think even if you're just getting this ability off twice, that's 2
good.
victory points. If you think about that, you're getting like a total. I mean, it's 1 victory point if you consider the fact that you're getting 1 extra bump from it. But we talked about Scientific Breakthrough being very good because it gives you a victory point. I think that condition's much harder to reach than Beguiling Pheromones. I think even if you're just using it once with another card and then trashing itself, I think it's still a really solid card.
Yeah, I think the one thing I would say for Beguiling, from my experience of playing with it, is that I wouldn't get this card expecting to buy a load of Spice Must Flows. I think it does I think it tends to ward people towards going more combat heavy. I don't know if that's something you guys have noticed or agree with, but that's what I think. Obviously, you're fighting for alliances, but like you're not going Beguiling Pheromones, and you're not like buying a lot of spice because, of course, you're trashing a lot of cards as you play them, and of course you're grafting, so you're going to have smaller hands. So you're typically going to have a smaller reveal on the whole.
Maybe.
I don't know if you would.
I don't know if I fully agree because you want to pair this with something that does draw cards, especially you want like a planned coupling. Yeah. You want to use it to go to a selective breeding. Like a selective breeding play with this is so good. It just covers all your bases. It gets you extra persuasion. It gets you an extra influence. It's going to fix your hand if you need to use more graft cards or whatever. So I don't know. Maybe not. I don't think it actually does because I think this one wants you to go more faction access, and there's only 3 faction access spaces that have combat. So anyway, next card. Lanny, why don't you take us to the next one?
Let's go with the best card of them all, Reclaim Forces.
Yeah, but I think it's about time to talk about this one.
All right.
I had it a D tier, third to from the tanks and industrial espionage, so I considered better options than those 2 just because it's flexible.
Quick reminder of what it does.
Sure. So it's 3 cubes for either a beetle bump or 2 cubes in your garrison. I typically like to use the garrison option just because I'm a combat junkie and I'm heavy into that, but it's a pretty nice surprise trick sometimes with second wave when you use it as an intrigue or use it alongside a Sarkar Legion. So I like those options available for me, so that's why I don't have it quite as low as the other 2 because of that reason.
Yeah, I don't have a lot else to add. I think I agree with you. And this card doesn't get discarded from the row. It's kind of like always there. It's the only thing we need to mention. Is a special kind of Tleilaxu card. But yeah, I use this a lot for like either a late game beetle, like I'm sitting on extra, what do they call, specimens, and then I just need to get that extra point. Kind of like the the experiment XL X137. I'm never gonna remember that. Yeah, it's kind of like that to me, but it's a little bit worse in times. I find that the go ahead.
So I've got it C tier.
Oh really?
In the
Wow.
end. I think I can't sit here and say I hate the card because I think the fact that it's always there does give it some value because it's like so that you always have in the back of your mind that regardless of what's going on in the game state, regardless of what the Tleilaxu Row is or isn't, like you always know that is an option. For whatever reason you need to use it for. I tend to default to beetles more often than not, rather than troops. Even though I go a lot of combat, I tend to try to kind of supplant my troops kind of the old-fashioned way a lot of the time. I don't buy troops a ton. I know a lot of people have played around with this, like going either all beetles or all troops, kind of trying to work out what works, and people have probably got a better idea of this card than when it first came out. But I think it's... I don't think 3 specimens for a beetle is ever terrible. Unless, like, it's the end of the game and it won't do anything for you. That is the one problem for it. Like, there's times that at the end of the game, you've just got some specimens sitting in the tanks, and it's like, you can't really do a lot with it because it's the final round, and the beetle doesn't help you, and you've got no way of putting the troops in. It's like, well, so be it, it's the way it goes.
Yeah.
But I don't think I can put it as D tier. I think having just be able to buy those beetles, even if you buy like a beetle or 2 passively, that's you could say that's half a victory point. And I can't hate it. If you've not really doing much else with those specimens, if you've not really got any cards on the road that interest you, if you're managing to produce these specimen cubes elsewhere, there are some cards that also produce specimen cubes on the side. It's better than a kick in the teeth as far as I'm concerned. I think it's better than D tier. I think it's like a low C tier. It's always there. It's an option. It's kind of it's a bit like the old Dune, where like if you had the problem of like what you can do with all the Solari, and then obviously now with more expansions, there's uses for that Solari late game rather than just sitting there finish the game with like 20 Solari because you got no way to spend it all. At the very worst, it's like a dump for like an intrigue at the end of the game, and who knows, you might roll into something all right.
Nice.
One hell of a glowing recommendation there. Better than kicking the teeth.
Yeah.
I mean, it is
getting kicked in
damn
the
fake
face.
plays.
Yeah.
It is damn fake plays, admittedly, but I think it's fine. Like, I can't hate it. I was wondering if I could, like, when I sat down, I was like, do I just put this as, like, my B tier and middle of the deck and go from there? I was like, I don't think it's quite that good, but it's a C tier for me.
Fair.
Yeah, I agree with you, BlackSHadow. I'm going to go C as well. I think it starts out like D tier, like F tier, and then as the game goes on, it gets better and better. Like, end of the game, if you're not going to be drawing cards, like, it's going to be better than Gola. It's going to be better than those just because this gives you an immediate reward, whereas if you don't need deck building, it's like done. So it scales as it goes. So that's why I wouldn't want to just leave it in D. But
I think that's a really good
it can
point.
potentially get you a victory point at the end of the game. So
Yeah, I think I'm gonna move mine up to C and maybe somewhere in the back of C. But you're right. This is a card that is meant to flex throughout the game. It's going to be kind of bad early. You're not going to use it, but late in the game, it just picks up those extra specimens and turns them into something useful. So it is kind of a catch-all, but I do use it like maybe twice a game. So I feel that should probably not be D tier, whereas I never use the other 2 cards.
Yeah, I mean, like, when you get your specimens early, the first thing you should be doing is buying a Tleilaxu Row card that's not Reclaim Forces and getting into your deck. But once you've bought that first one, I think it then becomes an option for you. It depends how many specimens you're generating, like... And it depends if you've got other uses. But if you pick like Tleilaxu Surgeon, for example, you're never going anywhere near Reclaim Forces because, of course, that's producing your beetles for you and stuff like that. And obviously, your specimens are producing elsewhere, and it's already its own funding. But if you don't have an outlet for that, this can be a way for you to get some extra rewards on the side. And if it helps you get to the victory point, end of the day, like that can't be terrible.
Cool. Let's do Twisted Mentat next. Ooh.
Yeah.
What do you guys think about that? Should I start this one?
Yeah.
I'm going to probably be the lowest tier. I think this is a C tier card. I don't like it very much. I think every time
I have a feeling this is going to be all over the place, but what does it do?
Yeah, so this one costs 4 specimens. It has a green lands red symbol and a city icon. It's a graft card. And it says, you may recall the agent you used to send to a space this turn. So basically, it lets you pick up the agent after you use it. It must be grafted with another card because it's a graft card. And it reveals for 1 persuasion, a sword, and a specimen. So the reason I have this in C tier is, like, recalling an agent is cool. Like, on paper, it's very good. But the problem is that you're inherently limiting the spaces you can use to send your agent because you're grafting this card to another card. Now, there's definitely there's kind of cool stuff you can do if you use it with, like, your convincing arguments, right? And you're getting use out of them, quote unquote. And then you get to do another thing. That's great. But that doesn't always happen, and I think you probably get 1 good use out of this card, and I think it just significantly hampers your ability to be flexible during the game. If you get blocked because you recalled, but you sent the card with it is like a graft card you needed. Like, I've had that happen, and it just feels so bad, and it's a little hard to predict too which card I should keep in hand. It feels a little bit like Elace's 3 steps ahead ability, which got significantly better with this expansion. But I think that I don't really like this card. I don't like any of the 4-cost cards, the 4-cost specimen cards. I think they're all kind of poopy, but that's me.
Nope, I totally agree with you. I dislike it too. Not quite so much as a C tier, but I probably had a low to mid B tier just because it's really clunky. Like, unless you're Ilban, where you can hit the Mentat and make up for the card loss. Just imagine going to, let's say, Carthag with that card. Your 5 cards down to 3, and you still have 3 actions to work with. That's very limiting in terms of that. So you got to have a lot of good draw power, and not a lot of leaders have a good draw power. So you got to be able to utilize the great effect, or else it's pretty useless. And it's not talk about whether or not someone used a test of humanity on you or behind. Like, what are you going to do next, right? So it's a lot of factors in that, and it's, as CJ said, it's super expensive too. So yeah, it's a lot of tempo you might be losing.
I will bet that Shadow's going to like this card because it works really well with Paul.
I mean, it does.
It does. It works really well with Paul. Ilban too.
This is a difficult card to rank. I did struggle with this a little bit. Like, you look at this card, and I think if you've never played Immortality before, let's say you've played a load of Dune Imperium, Rise of X, that sort of thing, like we all were like 3 months ago, and you go down to your local store, and it's like, all right, let's get the expansion. It's time to bust it open. And you look at the Tleilaxu cards, you see to expand, you look at it, you think, this has got to be one of the best cards in the game. Like, on the face of it, being able to just recall agents and take more actions, like, that just looks amazing with the grafting, that sort of thing. But
yeah,
it doesn't somehow, and I haven't yet worked out exactly why. It is kind of cumbersome, and it's bizarre because you'd think with being able to recall your agent, it's like one of the most flexible cards, and it has grafting. It's one of the most flexible cards in the game, but it does cause some issues on the side. Obviously, because you're going through loads of actions, you're more or less generally sacrificing spiceless flows, I think, a lot of the time, because obviously you're going down the action route. This card is also expensive. At 4 specimen cubes, that is a pretty healthy investment. But I see it all the time. Players will more than happily build up those 4 specimen cubes to get this card into their hand, like round 3, round 4. They will happily do it. The issue then, of course, is if you're having to wait 4 rounds to get this into your deck, how often are we seeing this? You need the game to go long to get a load of value out of Twisted Mentat. If you only see Twisted Mentat twice, is that worth it? I don't know. I think it depends what you're doing. The thing is, well, that's different to say, obviously, the thing to compare this to is obviously Kwisatz Haderach, which is, 8 persuasion, obviously very, very expensive. But it allows you to infiltrate, whereas this instead is like the reverse. You're putting down the agent, but then you're taking it back immediately, which isn't denying it to other players.
Yeah. Yeah.
That is the thing. That is the real marker of Mentat. It's not like, say, it's not like, say, you go to Interstellar Shipping and then you're using Quizats to take the agent away, put it back there immediately, and no one else get it. Like, if you go instead of shipping with Twisted Mentat and you put the agent back, well, I mean, do you really think you're going to see Instead of Shipping again by the time it gets back to you? I don't think so. So that is the problem. It does make Twisted Mentat a bit more awkward. The one thing I will say for Twisted, though, if you haven't got a great deck, in a weird way, I think this actually has some extra value because it's more about just the sheer volume of actions you're taking sometimes rather than the actual quantity. Like if you've got cards that either need you to act late, be it like Desert Ambush, be it stuff like you've got trying to think of other examples. There are other bits and pieces like that. Maybe like Gunfopters, like ambush late. If you've got Sardaukar Legion, but you want to hold off your reveal for as long as physically possible so people don't know you've got it and you can kind of surprise people in combat, and you just need to stall. Like, Twisted Mentat is a fantastic stall card. There's no question. Twisted Mentat, so like getting the Mentat is pretty good. And I can't hate that at all. I'd say that's probably one of its best uses is just hitting Mentat with this because you're drawing the card back, you've got loads of actions, but it can be a bit of a trap. And I'll say that from having seen it, and I'll say that from having been there as well. So, ultimately, at the end of the day, I think I've still got this as just about an A tier card. I still think being able to have those agent actions in a game where there's so much value in taking loads of actions, I think it's still worth it, but it's B/A. It really depends on what you're doing. It depends who you're playing as, and it depends like what you're going to place alongside with. But I would still at least be very tempted by it in a row if it was there. I would certainly consider it, although there are better cards for the value. If it was three specimens, I'd say A tier for sure. But 4, it's difficult. And the thing is, I know there's people that will be listening to this and be saying, you're all completely ridiculous. This has to be the best card in the game. But once you play it a lot, I don't know. It feels like it should be able to do more than it achieves. It's really strange. And I've seen games where Mentat's been really effective, but it is a bit hit or miss more than it really has any right to be. It's very strange.
Yep, I'll throw it in B tier as well. I agree with everything you guys said. Additionally, the fact that it is a late game card. Quizats is designed in a way that it's still really good in the end game. It will cycle itself out, whereas Twisted Mentat is costing you 2 cards to get that extra agent action. And late game, when you will have this card online, a lot of other people will have extra actions as well. And those premier spots that you want to be going to with that extra action, they're going to be filled up. So I think in that regard, it's just kind of, it has all of the weaknesses that you would expect with an extra action without the kind of Quizats beauty attached to it, because it doesn't infiltrate, it doesn't draw you a card, and it's just, like you said, clunky. So I think I don't think it's terrible. That's why I still have it in the B tier, but I don't think it's insanely powerful.
I think
the
that
summation we've got to here is that there should be no 4 specimen card cost cards in the game.
Well,
they're all too expensive.
no,
is that our summation here?
The problem is that the 3-cost cards are just way too good.
They're so good. That's that is the truth.
Yeah,
isn't
Gola
it,
should be 4.
Yeah, if Gola was 4, if Stitched Horror was 4, and these other cards were 3s, then I'd say that's fine. But I mean, maybe the thing is not balancing the power level, but the frequency of use. And that's the thing that they're probably doing here is that, Twisted Mentat, if you saw that more, you'd probably be like, nah. Or if you saw, Usurp in every game, you're like, that's too much randomness. You know what I mean? Like, those things could be negative player experiences. So I understand why they're very high, but I don't think that they're nearly on the same level as the good 3s. So... All right, Orski, we got another one.
Tleilaxu Infiltrator.
Yes. This is our
2
last
specimen
one.
cost card.
No, we got
2
a
left,
couple.
actually.
What are we missing? No, what am I missing? Seriously.
Unnatural reflexes.
Unnatural
Yeah, one
reflexes. I missed that one. Okay.
The only one.
So Tleilaxu Infiltrator costs 2 specimens, has blue access. It is a graft card. Enemy agents do not block your agent this turn. And on top of that, it lets you draw a card. And if you have 2 of the DNA symbols, you get an intrigue card. And it reveals for 1 persuasion. This card's S tier.
Yeah.
I think this card is, like, I don't know. I felt like it was probably been really good, even if it just had the enemy agents don't block your agent this turn. But then they're
Yes.
like, you know what? Screw it. We'll add a card draw in and maybe even an intrigue card too. They
Thank
just
you.
kept piling on this card. It's crazy. With the strength of shipping in Rise of Ix and Immortality, Tleilaxu Infiltrator will usually give you like a good use in and of that. But just being able to go to any space you want whenever you want with this card is just so good. And you don't even have to pay the graft penalty by using 2 cards to do it because you get a card back. This card is nuts,
Yeah, it is
especially
crazy.
at 2 specimens.
I will
100%.
say this, I think out of the entire row, this is definitely the card that varies the most in value depending if you have got the X expansion or not, purely because of incentive shipping. And that's the only reason why, that is always. And I've played a couple of games of Immortality without X, and I had one where I saw Toxic Infiltrator played, and it is a little more nuanced trying to work out what you're doing. It tends to end up being used, I think, for a lot of alliance stealing and contesting of stuff and that sort of thing, a lot more of the time. But yeah, definitely. If Rise of X exists and shipping exists, this is crazy. I don't know how this is a 2 specimen cost card. Well, I lie. I do know why this is a 2 specimen cost card. That's because we've had a history of this game of stuff that infiltrates has always been super cheap.
Yeah.
Like throughout the entire game, Web of Power, Choem Delegate, Jamis, even Court Intrigue. All these cards you could easily have put an extra like Persuasion on. And even with some of them, they probably still feel too cheap. It's just that's the way it's always been in this game. Stuff that infiltrates has always been, except I guess Kwisatz, but Kwisatz is a special case. Has always been probably too cheap, and you could well do a bit more expensive. And Infiltrator just continues that. But yeah, it's an insane agent box, absolutely crazy.
I don't see the hype behind it.
But here we go.
No, it's ridiculous. Sorry, pardon the language. It's too damn good. I mean, you want to go somewhere, it goes somewhere, gives you a card back. City access where city access doesn't belong, gives you an intrigue. What is there to say about this? It's aside from just drawing into it and being forced to reveal, it's got everything you need, and it's dirt cheap too for its cost. It's so good.
I have one criticism for this card.
Oh, let's hear
I
it.
do have one. Boring. I'm sorry. I talked about this obviously with Chair Dog and the other cards. I think you got a really cool design. Tleilaxu Infiltrator is it's such a dull card. It's very effective. It's incredibly powerful, but obviously we're knowing that the majority of our play is with the Rise of Ix expansion. Unfortunately, about 85-90% of all infiltration in the game you've got an option just goes to interstellar shipping. Kwisatz Haderach is just go interstellar shipping. So Axe Infiltrator, go interstellar shipping. The infiltrate, so you're not blocked. It's always interstellar shipping, which is my one criticism of Ix, because it's such a powerful space. It's all this stuff ever gets used for. That's why with the game where it didn't exist, it was a far more interesting thinking what it was going to get played with and how you're going to get the most out of it. But yeah, it's like I have to rate it S tier because it is an S tier garb, but it's not very interesting to me. It's like I see it in the room, just like, oh, for goodness sakes, here we go again. And it's just like I feel obliged to get it because it's so strong, and I'll get this card and I'll just try to think of reasons not to use it instead of shipping, and I just can't think of any. And that is my one disappointment with Tax Infiltrator. The card is obviously the card's insane, but unfortunately, with the game as it currently is, instead of shipping, that's all infiltration almost ever gets used for, apart from specific cases where you're stealing alliance, or maybe getting your sword master because someone found a way to block it and you want the agent action economy. But other than that, it's maybe research station and an absolute push. But other than that, it's pretty much shipping all day with this card. So it's not very interesting, unfortunately. But it is ruthlessly efficient.
This is my number 1 card in the game. I think this is the best card in the game, by flat out best card in the game. It's not like remotely close. I think that this card is just does everything. It goes wherever you want. I mean, it doesn't go wherever you want. You have to have another card, but you can never be blocked. It single-handedly killed Helena with the expansion for me. I never play Helena. I will never play Helena with this card out. It's like, well, not picking that. I'll play someone else and just rush this thing. This is, I don't know why it does all the things it does, but infiltrating by itself is unbelievably powerful. We already have a blue infiltrate card, which is good. But now we have a blue infiltrate card that can potentially be an everything infiltrate card, which I find to be a little bit problematic. It also is the cheapest of the best cards, so it's highest for me. Yeah, you can easily get this round 1. You're pretty much set, in my view. Like, this is one of the most highly sought after cards, and usually the person who gets it ends up winning the game. Not always, but I have noticed things like that.
I mean, there's a card, and there's no question. But again, it's like, to me, it's like, there was one game I played where it broke my heart. I think I was playing as Paul as well, or something like that. And it was the beginning of the game, and the 2 cards came out was Tleilaxu Row and Chair Dog. I felt so bad. I was just like, what am I meant to do here? I so want to get Chair Dog. It's so much more fun and interesting and creative. You can do lots of cool stuff with it. I'm just like, but I just can't ever take it. Tleilaxu Row as well is one of those cards that you will definitely see people will early reveal just to get this.
Yep.
Round 1. 100%. You will definitely see that. I don't think it's quite at the level of like Tleilaxu Master, where you could probably just reveal instantly and get it and feel, yeah, I'm in pretty good shape to win this game. I spurn that conflict in the chats, and the chat just like sets on fire.
Tell us why we're wrong.
Yeah. But yeah, Tleilaxu's just, I mean, once you get it, it's like you have so much license to do whatever you want, and you just the only thing you can do if someone gets Tleilaxu inventory is the table makes an effort to try and stop you getting shipping access as long as humanly possible.
That's impossible. You have an infiltrate card.
You can't really stop them from getting it. Eventually, they're going to get there, like by like round 3, round 4, unless you're all going to agree. Right, we're all just going to keep hitting fold space, and like that's never going to happen. So yeah, it's brutal, this card. And of course, if you're going to do that, well, they can just Tleilaxu infiltrate to fold space, and then what are you going to do?
Yeah.
It's a disgusting card. I think the only reason it's not free specimens is because Immortality can be played without Rise of Ix. And I would argue that at 2 cost, I think it's a lot more justifiable, but with the Ix expansion, this should at least be free. I think it, without a question, shadow of a doubt, it is insane for its value. Absolutely nuts.
Yeah. Just not to say the same things over, I agree with you. I think that the one thing that's going for these other cards, like the Gola, Stitched Horror, and Piter, those are like also S tier cards. They're so good. Gola might be more high ceiling than this card. This card is the definition of consistency. It is the definition of consistency. When I have this in my hand, when I draw it, I feel so comfortable. I can just like freely plan my turn out however I want. I like go, okay, well, who's going to try to go? They're going to go there, so I can then ship if I need to. I don't have to worry about doing it out, in order or whatever. I can just do when I want to. I can get my sword master when I want to. Like, it's unbelievable how flexible this card is, and so
Infiltration's pretty good. One question I want to ask you guys while we're on this before we move on to our last card. Do you, because I honestly don't know, because I hate picking this card because it's just like, ugh. Like, here we go again. So I just pick other cards that are more interesting. How often do you find yourselves actually making any use out of the intrigue for this card? Like, do you make any attempts to try to get that? Or do you just like, this card's totally good as it is, and if I get it, great?
I always go for it 100% of the time. That intrigue is so good. The fear you install in people with an intrigue in your hand is worth more than the value of the intrigue in your hand itself.
Oh, yeah, I've talked about this many times.
Yeah, just the value of that uncertainty makes people overcommit, and that overcommit is worth those resources that you use to put towards pushing yourself to the end of the track.
So you'll rush like the top rung, get those research skips just to get there ASAP?
Yep, for sure. Because it'll add up in the final conflict where, I don't know, CJ put in an extra 2 troops in the round before just to beat me out just because he saw me with 2 extra intrigues. And so that two extra troops in this final conflict might make the difference when, in fact, I only had 2 faction bumps in my hand, for example, or something to that effect. So,
yeah, the compounding effects, the trickle-down effect of your choices definitely matters, and I think that's true here. It's a totally unnecessary thing that it does too. It's very
Yeah, it's
strange.
just like it's so random, isn't it?
Yeah.
Like this card's already great. It's like, oh yeah, if you've got max research, have an intrigue card. It's just like I don't know. It's completely.
It could have
insane.
given it to, X137.
Or anything. It's so random as well. Why would the Tleilaxu Row care about? I guess in a way,
Intriguing.
I get it.
He's intriguing, secretive,
I see. What you
thematically
did there.
secretive.
Find my vomit bucket. But yeah, it's this card is insane. Its card is great, anyways. If you've got access to shipping, it's probably one of the best cards in the game. Like out of everything, and that's including Imperium Row and everything going on. This card is nuts.
We should have done this ranking based on, so from the tanks is like, would we like to throw it back to the tanks, or would we like to Gola get it?
Gola
get it. You guys.
I'm glad we've only got one card left to do here.
All right, let's do that one.
Yeah, Unnatural Reflexes. It's a free coster. It has only got the triangle mining / chipping access. It does graft. It has a reveal of 1 persuasion, 1 sword. But the interesting thing with this one, its main draw, is that if you have the first research marker, i.e., you've gone a few steps into the research track, you draw 2 cards when you play this.
Its main draw, and you gave me crap?
I didn't.
Just kidding.
So, I'm very curious to know what people think about this, because I have a feeling that people's perception of this card, from what I've gathered, I think it's changed a lot. I think when this first came out, and this game first came out, people saw this and thought, oh, that's awesome and really, really good. But I'm not sure it's as good as it looks. I'm not sure. I mean, I've got this.
What?
I don't know. I think maybe because I don't hit researching a ton. Maybe I don't because I get, but I only got this as like an upper B tier. I don't have this as like one of the best cards in the game.
Whoa.
You're kind of spending 2 cards and then you're getting 2 cards back, which is not bad, I guess. But I mean, you could just, instead of having unnatural reflexes, you could just surely get a card you actually want. I don't know. I'm curious what you think of this. I think our opinions might vary a bit here.
So you're saying that you can just have normal reflexes instead of unnatural reflexes?
Yeah, I guess you could say that.
Sorry, guys.
Deck cycling to me is a very vital function of the game, where when you have Quizzatch, you want to hit that as often as possible, but sometimes you need to cycle your deck quicker than before, and so Unrelenting Assault allows that to happen more frequently, even though you're using 2 cards to get 2 cards.
Unnatural reflexes.
Yeah.
You keep calling it unrelenting assault.
My bad.
I was gonna say, you said that, and I was
We're
like,
expanding the tier list.
is he still in the Caribbean here? Like, what's going on?
Hell yeah.
He wishes.
I really wish, man. Stories to be told some other time, I guess.
Yeah, we'll get there. Anyways.
So with regards to that, it's just straight up good because you're cycling into cards that you need to cycle into more often, and it also allows you to go into zones that you might not otherwise be able to because of the graft capabilities of it. So it allows a lot of flexibility on that end. So that's why I view it as an A tier card. Not quite S tier, probably a bottom tier for me, but its flexibility and its deck cycling is a very useful tool that I think is very good for deck manipulators like Paul, for example. So that's how I view that card.
Yeah, I have it in A tier. I think it is a very solid card. It takes a little bit of time for it to come online, so I think that needs to be baked into the price. You're going to have to hit at least 3 research bumps before you're actually getting the card draws out of it. And if you compare it against the other 3-cost Benny Tleilaxu cards, I don't think it's as powerful as them, so it doesn't make it into the S tier for me. But being able to cycle out 2 cards with this and kind of, it's very flexible, is what I'll say. And I think it is good. I just don't think it's S tier level.
Yeah, I 100% agree with you guys. I think this is a top of A for me. I think it's slightly better than where I had the experimentation one, the research one that gives you an extra point. It's just slightly better for me. I like drawing cards. And for me, this card is also very flexible. It goes to the right icon. I mean, shipping's important. And drawing cards is good. So, I mean, I will always pick this up. It doesn't always. This isn't a card that will win you the game, but it will help you find the cards that will win you the game. So if you have like a Tleilaxu Master, this is even more powerful in your deck. So you want to see that as much as possible, or like a Gurney or a Kwisatz or anything like that. So if you have like some really high power cards, then I think this card even goes up in value and could be a potential S tier card. So
it lives on. In fact, it's a graph card, doesn't it? Like if
It
this
does.
was not a graph card, I think this would plummet in value. But ultimately, it is, and it's that fixability, I suppose, that does help a lot. And the fact you can send it to wherever you want. Like I've seen, obviously, a Natural Reflexes sent to like Selected Breeding, and obviously that's pretty gnarly. There are a lot of pieces that can be. But I don't know, it's kind of weird. Like, I should like this more. Again, I play a lot of pool, and obviously know what I'm withdrawing is great, but I don't know, something about it just doesn't ring amazing with me. Maybe because I just don't make a ton of punts, like, really far down the research track. Like, I don't often go research heavy early. I do have a habit of revealing my experimentations for the specimens more than playing them, because I'd rather do other things, I guess. I don't know, maybe it's just the way I approach the game.
Well, I must say it works really well with Unrelenting Assault too. So 4-card draw, right? Or 5 if you put it to Arakeen. So it's pretty damn good.
what is Unrelenting Assault?
Unrelenting Assault is the non-graph card. It's the one that allows for 2 draws if you have more troops deployed than anybody else.
Well, that was
Oh,
cool.
that's what you were talking about.
What it was called Show of Strength.
Yeah, it's called Show of Strength. Yeah,
Oh,
that.
shoot, is it? Oh my
Yeah,
God,
you're
I'm
just making
sorry.
up names for cards now.
Go back to bed.
I know. Oh my God, it's been so many hours. I was only called in 15 minutes prior, so don't blame me, guys.
That's all good.
Only the highest quality podcasting action you're going to find. Everyone. Only the highest quality.
All right, I think we get
And
to
on
call
that
it, guys.
bombshell.
Yeah, let's call it here. We're at 2 hours and 40 minutes ish. That's way too long. This is supposed to be a 45-minute podcast, guys. But I
Yeah, we
appreciate
better
you.
start this. Yeah,
I
we
had a
said,
feeling
you
when
know,
you said that, I'm
short,
like, oh,
short,
yeah.
concise topics. I'm like, well, I don't know. I mean, it took us. I mean, we did 80 cards. It took us about like 8-9 hours.
It did, yeah. So anyway, I appreciate y'all being here. Thank you to BlackSHadow. Thank you to Orski, and thank you to Lannister for being here and talking to us about more Dune cards. And that is going to do it for us. Thank you. If you like this podcast and got this far, please like and subscribe. And if you want to support us, you can at Patreon at patreon.com/hiddenassets. And we will see you all later.